All right, welcome to the conversation on the TYT network. Now we're going to talk to someone you might recognize, David Hogg. He's an activist and obviously Parkland shooting survivor, founder of March for Our Lives and a board member, author of Never Again, A New Generation Draws the Line, and he's now in a new movie called Us Kids. That's a documentary about Parkland. David, welcome to TYT.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. David, I know you and Marjorie Taylor Greene have got a conflict going on now, and it relates to guns. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about all the things that you're up to. But I actually want to show a trailer of Us Kids, the documentary that you're in, first, because it's really compelling, and I want to talk about that as well. So let's watch the trailer.
Before all of this, we were normal ass kids doing normal ass things.
This is my post-apocalyptic cooking show.
Sometimes life takes you in a different direction and you gotta go.
Just 6 minutes and 20 seconds, 17 hearts stopped beating.
18-year-old senior Sam Fuentes was shot in both legs.
I was thinking about how were we gonna get out? If he was gonna come back, was I going to die? And I saw Emma on TV, and I remember just like looking up to her and thinking, wow, I can do that.
From South Florida to the south side of Chicago, these two groups are vowing to work together on the gun issue.
That's all we ever wanted in the first place, was to be listened to.
It's always the same shit. So what if we got to change it this time?
How many of you lost someone in this? Cameron went off script.
Can you tell me right now that you will not accept a single donation from the NRA? And then shit went down.
Nationwide walkout inspired by Parkland, Florida.
It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to actually make it happen.
So David, that last line about making it happen, well, that's the hard part, right? And so you guys did something that nobody else has done, which is to actually be honest about this issue and challenge folks. We had Cameron on the show last week and Samantha too, and that moment where the movie's right to point out when he went off script and asked about the donations, that was a seminal moment. But unfortunately, politicians are who they are and the media is who they are. And so far there's been almost no action taken. So I'm curious what you think about the lessons learned in starting the movement that you guys did that had such a big impact in terms of people recognizing the issue, and then what's happened since.
Yeah, I think the biggest lessons that we've learned is the importance of realizing that social movements are not like campaigns, unfortunately. They don't have a set end date. They don't have, an election day. They're much more akin to not even a marathon, I found, but much more like an ultra marathon where we're told to go from, we started one place like Parkland and we're told to go to a place like DC, but we have no map of how to get there. So we really have to pace ourselves because we're certainly going to go down a number of, wrong roads and stuff on our way there. But I think that's the biggest lesson that we've learned in this time period. Is the importance of taking care of ourselves and realizing that this really is a marathon and not a sprint. Yeah,
so David, in the beginning, you guys had a lot of success because you didn't listen to the rules. And I think that made a big difference. So whether it was saying, hey, I don't care what you think, we're gonna start an organization and we're gonna speak out. I don't care what you say about thoughts and prayers. No, we need to actually do something about this. I don't care what you tell me about how politicians are honest. No, they take money from the NRA and they do what they're told, and that made a giant difference. So, but Cameron last week was saying, but now Biden's in charge, and so now it's harder, ironically, because there's no boogeyman. And so, have you run into resistance from allies like, hey guys, don't push so hard, now's not the time, etc.?
Yeah, I think we hear that all the time, but it's something that we use our youthfulness to our advantage in, because if anybody has credibility to speak on this issue, it's the young people that are the people that are most impacted by it and are going to be around the longest and have the best chance of doing something about it, which are the people that have the most years left. And I think that there certainly have been some challenges with allies because it's about he was right in that there is no boogeyman in many senses. But similarly, I think it's more challenging because we've realized through this work that although we have to address the NRA, obviously, and gun laws, the issue of gun violence is a very multifaceted one that must be addressed from a lens of not only how does somebody get a gun, but why do so many young people, especially in the United States, feel the need to pick up a gun in the first place. And that brings in conversations around systemic inequality, poverty, racial injustice, environmental injustice, and all these different forms of purposeful injustice that have been built into our country's structure and our government structure and our policies that also need to be addressed. So I think, although you may not see March for Our Lives as much on TV anymore, for example, I think it's important to realize that a lot of the work that we are doing is some of the most important, I would argue even more important than a march, but it doesn't get, it's not big and flashy. It doesn't get on TV. And it's work like mutual aid, working with communities on the ground that are the most impacted by gun violence and asking the organizations that work in those communities how we can assist them, and not saying this is what we're going to do for you, as is often the case in the nonprofit industrial complex, but asking them how can we be supportive of you, how can we be allies to you, and coming to them humbly asking that. But unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily get on TV very much when we're talking about the fact that mental health does need to be talked about, but in a way where it's not stigmatizing it, but talks about the fact that 2/3 of gun deaths are suicides. It's not something super sexy that gets on TV. It's difficult because the most important work isn't the stuff that gets on TV.
Yeah. So in terms of federal legislation, any hope? I mean, I don't see any hope. I'm just curious what you see, or maybe even more to the point, how in the world? Because you're knee deep in it. You're doing this all the time. How do we break through and have any prayer of being able to pass federal background checks, getting rid of AK-47s and AR-15s and all these crazy weapons in our streets? Because right now it looks like the Democrats have largely given up, and then of course the Republicans love it.
Well, I think ultimately it also comes down to the fact that we have the filibuster, which enables our elected officials to subvert the majority will of the American people who want to protect their kids and protect everyday Americans, and not weapons like an AR-15. And I think ultimately, aside from, although there are certainly challenges with our allies that claim to be on our own side that don't want things to go too far, which I think is absurd and ridiculous, because I think that there's no way that we could ever go too far until nobody's dying from gun violence in this country. I think even more so than those those false allies, we have to challenge the filibuster and, in my opinion, abolish it so that we can actually, pass laws that the majority of American people support that protect people and not guns. I will say that I think there have been some successes, even if small, even in Republican-led states, with things like extremist protection orders that are basically restraining orders for guns that use due process and right to counsel to remove guns from people that are a danger to themselves and others. That have been passed in several Republican states, including Florida. We've also seen a significant increase in funding for the CDC and NIH to do gun violence research, which previously it had basically been illegal for them to study the effectiveness of state gun laws in comparison to states with weaker, stronger gun laws. And those are small things, but in addition, we've also seen a massive increase in violence intervention programs that are community-led, not based in policing, but are focused on using restorative justice and a public health-based approach to reducing violence that I think are actually going to have way more impact, in my opinion, or just as much impact as something like universal background checks.
Yeah, in the past, the filibuster was historically used to prevent civil rights legislation. Now it's expanded to preventing civil rights legislation and anything the Chamber of Commerce doesn't want to pass. So what a wonderful part of democracy. It's totally made up. It has a terrible, hateful past, and it's only used to help people like Joe Manchin and the entire Republican Party as well, and Kristen Sinema, another Democrat, to hide their corporate donors and hide their shame for what they would actually vote for without the filibuster. All right, now speaking of shameful people in Congress, you had a suggestion for Marjorie Taylor Greene recently. What, limit our access to guns? Tell me more about that. Why and what do you mean?
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Somebody that's chasing Congress, members, and even, I was just 18 years old at the time, like that. Saying I have, basically implying that they were ready to shoot me or shoot other people when they were talking about how they have a concealed weapon and things like that. I don't think anybody like that should necessarily have a gun. Now, realistically, do I think anything's going to happen? No, because unfortunately, I think we wait for really bad stuff to happen until we're, legislators get the courage to act, unfortunately, a lot of the time. But I don't think somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is clearly unstable, should have access to a weapon like an AR-15 or any weapon, period. In my opinion, they are a danger to them, likely to themselves, but for sure to others, as we've seen with the recent video that came out about AOC and the videos that have come out of various other people and Congress members as well. So, unfortunately, there's a long history of gun violence taking place on the floor, the House and Senate floor. I don't want to see that history repeat itself when we have the chance to prevent it right now. And I seriously just think that, something needs to be done.
David, thank you again, brother. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We are on to something that is going to be amazing, but what we need is your help.
The number one problem is there's too much power in too few hands.
Every single problem that we have can be traced back to dark money.
They take large donors, they serve large donors.
So these handful of gatekeepers try to dictate everything.
Like all of you already know, they don't work for you, they work for their donors. So fire them and hire people who will only work for you that say no corporate backed money.
We are going to change the way we elect candidates in this country.
Uncorrupted Democrats. We're going to fight for the issues and win on policy.
This is incredibly personal. We need free health care for everyone.
We're fighting for $15 minimum wage, single-payer health care, debt-free college, and we are going to get money out of politics once and for all.
I've taken a public pledge not to accept any corporate money.
Because the last thing we're going to do is go into another presidential election and run a corporatist against a populist candidate.
At some point, the buck needs to stop, and it's gonna stop with us. It's gonna stop with Justice Democrats.
So who are we?
People who do not take corporate PAC money.
We're relying on small donors.
99.9% of our contributions came from people.
You're a Justice Democrat, so you don't take any corporate PAC money.
I'm not influenced by money.
As a Justice Democrat, I made that pledge.
Not a penny.
Absolutely not.
I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
We try to create a government which works for all of us.
That is what America's about, and that's what a representative democracy should be about.
We are just getting warmed up here.
Vote for uncorrupted Democrats. The fight starts now, it starts today, and it starts with you.
I've been honest with him. Like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
Did you know that more than 20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon? Why? Because of trees. I know what you're thinking. Of course! So what do we want to do? We want to plant more trees so we can save the climate. It's quite literal. So that's what leads to our new partner, Plant Your Change. Love it. It's so easy. What they do is you take the credit or debit cards you already have and you plug it into the system. And if you so choose, you get to round up every purchase to the nearest dollar and they plant a tree for you. Okay. Now you could also choose if you want to do it on only certain kinds of purchases or only so often, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But literally every cent makes a difference here. It's Plant Your Change. And if you want to know more information, just go to tyt.com/trees. Let's go save the planet together.
Now, top. No. No.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet. All right, back on the conversation. Great guest for you guys. Now, Diallo Brooks is a senior director for field mobilization at People for the American Way. Diallo, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. So now we're going to talk about Kristen Clark. She is up for leading the Civil Rights Division in the Justice Department, and she has run into significant Republican opposition. So first, can you tell us about Kristen?
Well, first of all, Kristen has a tremendous civil rights record. She's been a part of the civil rights community for a very long time and has been a very important advocate for civil rights and social justice for a very long time. And so it's an exciting time to see her be nominated for this particular position. We think she'll be amazing. We know her work from the past, but also like one really significant case is how she really drilled down and worked hard in Maryland to help them change their hate crime laws to make it more impactful in order to be able to prosecute around hate crimes. And there was a specific case, Richard Clark III, who was murdered by a white supremacist, and she utilized that case and helped the family to move that case and have hate crimes charged, and to push for some sort of justice in that particular case in Maryland.
So now I see why Republicans are opposed to her. But what's their excuse? So she actually prosecutes hate crimes. She actually wants to do civil rights. That's why she's arguably perfect for the position. So, but they usually come up with something invented. So what have they invented this time?
I mean, they've really been reaching. They tried to say that she was anti-Semitic. That's not true. They tried to blame her on being anti-police in actually a report that was actually forwarded that wasn't hers. And so they're just making up a lot of excuses to not confirm her, because really what they want, they don't want to see somebody that's going to step into that very critical role at the Department of Justice that will work really, really hard for the people of this country to move forward civil rights and to make sure that the Justice Department prosecutes civil rights cases that come before it. And so it's important that we get her confirmed, but at the same time for them, they don't want to see that office become an effective office, an effective tool for justice.
Okay, so we just had a tie vote on her, and I want to ask how you guys are going to move on past that tie vote and how much trouble that is. But I just want to be clear with the audience. So the Republicans say she might be anti-Semitic. Let me give you a group of organizations that have backed her: the National Council of Jewish Women, the Anti-Defamation League, Union of Reform Judaism, and 79 different local, state, and national Jewish organizations. So obviously not remotely true. But that's never stopped Republicans before. And leading the charges, Mike Lee and Ted Cruz. So you get a sense of the veracity of these charges. And they had one other thing though, Diallo. They said she once wrote an editorial saying that police should be reformed. Wow, ooh, I didn't know she was that radical. So isn't the Civil Rights Division to some degree supposed to be concerned about police reform?
Yeah, I mean, they're supposed to be concerned about police reform. They're supposed to be concerned about voting rights, some of the critical issues of protecting citizens in this country. And so, we want to see a civil rights department in the Justice Department be effective. And she's somebody who could lead that department towards being effective. And so what we want to see is Leader Schumer in the Senate to bring a discharge petition to the floor to pull the nomination out of committee to be considered by the full Senate. We think she's the right person for the job. We are really fighting really hard to make sure that women of color are not trampled upon by these conservatives in the legislature. The GOP has kind of rallied around their super right-wing conservatism, and we want to make sure that the Justice Department is effective. She is a brilliant lawyer. She's a brilliant advocate for justice, and she needs to be confirmed, and she should be confirmed. There's no reason why she shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, I knew about her nomination well before this, and her credentials looked excellent, and I supported it. But the more the Republicans opposed her, the more I became in favor of her, because the dynamic honestly is, this is the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. So whoever is more qualified and more likely to do a good job, they will be more opposed to, not less opposed to. They don't want the Civil Rights Division to function in the Justice Department. So if they're fighting her tooth and nail, that means they think she's definitely the right candidate and they're worried. So now let's talk through a little bit more what happens in the tie. In committee, all the Republicans vote no, it's 11-11. And did any Democrats vote no?
No. So what needs to happen is it was a vote along party lines, deadlocked, and so what we need is the majority leader, Chuck Schumer, to actually file a discharge petition, and that would move the vote to the floor, or pull the nominee to the floor out of the committee, so the full Senate can actually have a vote to consider her nomination. And so that's what we hope is the next step. That should be the next step to move this process forward. We know that Republicans are lining up together and locking arms together to block any nominee that's put through, and it's very troublesome to see the level of pushback against women of color, particularly as they are going through the nominations process. She's definitely qualified to do the job. They know that, and that's why they're against her.
She'd be the first woman of color to lead the Civil Rights Division, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and so Diallo, now you got me a little worried. Is there any reason why Chuck Schumer wouldn't bring it to the full Senate floor? Is that still in question? I'm trying to figure out, because you never know with Democrats.
Yeah, you never know, but we have confidence that Leader Schumer will do the right thing and move it forward. It's in his best interest to do that. I think he understands where we are in this process. He also understands the obstruction that the other side is pushing forward. All of us are reaching out to make sure that he understands that we support moving her forward. We accept nothing less than seeing her move forward, and we have confidence that she will move forward, and the Senate will vote to confirm her. She's the right person for the job. She's done this work. She knows the work. And she understands what it takes to lead that particular office of the Justice Department.
Look, I'm gonna keep it real here because that's what I do. I'm not a big fan of Neera Tanden. But even for Neera Tanden, I was like, you can't let the Republicans decide who your cabinet is or who your important government officials are. So if folks had real reasons to oppose Neera Tanden, but Republicans didn't have him, right? Like Republicans had the same fake reasons, progressives had real reasons, etc. But I would have fought even on that ground, let alone Kristen Clarke. They can't let Republicans veto a woman of color for the Civil Rights Division that has this good a record. They just can't let that stand. So, Diallo, how can people help? Can people, participate somehow to push this forward?
Yeah, folks can definitely participate. One is to call your senators and make sure that your senators know that it's really, really important to move her nomination forward. People for the American Way has been involved in Her Fight, Our Fight campaign, which is really pushing forward these women of color nominees. We did an incredible video on Kristen Clarke that really kind of tells her story. So if folks continue to share that video, which you can find on our website. But like I said, it's really to call in to the Senate, let them know that she is the person that we want to see leading the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, that they need to move forward on this, call Leader Schumer, encourage him to move forward on this, and understand that there's a large community that are working together to make sure that this nomination moves forward. And so, join the echo chamber, tweet, call, do whatever it takes to help move this forward.
Yeah, people for the American Ways have been great on Kristen Clarke and all these great nominees. So less than a minute left, real quick. If she's in the Civil Rights Division, what are some things that she can actually get done that people can be excited about?
Well, one of the key things is we're looking at a crisis around policing in this country. And so we really need to reimagine public safety, and we need to also have a Justice Department that's willing to step up around policing issues and hold police accountable for their misconduct and mistreatment of communities. Secondly, we're also in a crisis around voting rights in this country. And so having her front and center will be very critical in moving forward to protect our voting rights as a country. And so, having her on the scene for just those two particular fights is really critical for making sure that our government actually functions the way it's supposed to function, as to protect the people. Our civil rights department is there to make sure that people's civil rights are not violated. And when they are, they're there to hold folks accountable. And she's the type of person that will make sure that that happens.
All right, Diallo Brooks from People for the American Way. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Young Turks, Cenk Uygur Kasparian with you guys. We got a lot of news for you all. The establishment is beginning to strike back in Washington on domestic issues. We'll explain that a little bit later in the program. Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing what she does, but
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
You
got to get the middle name right.
Okay, gotcha. So we will get to her later, but you'll enjoy her latest hypocrisy. They got nothing but hypocrisy. But unfortunately, we start with not great news out of the Middle East.
All right, let's do it. What you just witnessed are airstrikes in the Gaza Strip, and unfortunately, the death toll among Palestinian civilians continues to mount as Israeli airstrikes in Gaza enter their second week. Now, the situation on the ground has not improved at all over the weekend. In fact, the conflict has only escalated. The current conflict has escalated rapidly into one of the worst rounds of violence between the Israelis and Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Since 2014, that was when 2,200 Gazans were killed in the middle of the fighting. Approximately half of them were civilians at the time. But over the weekend, we learned that 2 Israeli airstrikes in Gaza killed at least 43 Palestinians, including 8 children, and injured 50 others, most of whom were women and children early Sunday, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. That information has been confirmed with independent organizations as well, humanitarian organizations. Shelters, buildings, and homes housing civilians were bombed, and we're about to show you an example of one of the buildings that was bombed just this past weekend. Take a look.
Early Saturday morning, Israeli warplanes struck a home in the crowded camp, killing at least 10 people, 8 of them children. Among them, 4 of Mohammed Hadidi's 5 sons and his wife. The only son to survive, found under the rubble, was 5-month-old Omar. They destroyed the house without warning at 1:30 in the morning, says Mohammed. People were sleeping. The children were sleeping.
Entire families are being wiped out in these airstrikes. Hadidi's family is one of them. The only person in his family who survived was a 5-month-old baby, his son Omar. Early Saturday, a 5-month-old baby named Omar was the lone survivor in a house that was hit and destroyed in an Israeli airstrike that hit the Al-Shati refugee camp, killing 10 members of his family, including 8 children, according to the infant's father, Mohammed Hadidi. He also was quoted as saying, "They were so happy to get away from the grief, but they didn't know it was their turn," he said. Hadidi lost his wife, 3 children, and his brother and sister-in-law, and their 4 children in the strike. He was also quoted as saying, "They didn't do anything bad to anyone. They were looking for a happy place to celebrate Eid." Hadidi said, crying, "Why were they punished?"
What were they punished for? So it's Eid is the most sacred religious holiday in Islam, and Netanyahu's government attacked Al-Aqsa Mosque during Eid, which lasts 30 days, and then at the end, or Ramadan lasts 30 days, and at the end you have Eid, and so that is why they had gone over to their uncle's house, that gentleman's brother's house, and they thought they would be more safe there. And it turns out they weren't, because there's nowhere to hide, because Gaza is an open air prison. So, and it's very densely populated. It's a tiny strip of land. And so when they drop bombs, they know with great certainty that they're going to kill civilians. It's not like they missed the over 500 children that they killed in 2014 in that conflict. It's not like they're unaware of the 58 children killed in this conflict. It's not that they're unaware that these bombs are massive, and when you throw them in the middle of a civilian population, you're gonna kill lots of people's brothers, sisters-in-laws, kids, grandmothers, etc. And they keep saying Hamas is hiding in among civilian populations in Gaza. There is nothing but civilian populations. And so one way that the civilians could be separated from the others is if, for example, Israel did not have a permanent blockade and people could run out of Gaza instead of it being, I guess, a shooting gallery for the Israeli Defense Forces. But they're all trapped. There's nowhere to go. And so, but let me just address this absurd talking point that is pure propaganda by the Israeli government. They say Hamas uses civilians as shields because they fire from the general vicinity. This is the same kind of Cheney-esque talking point we got during the Iraq War when Dick Cheney said Iraq comes from the same geographic region of the world as the people who attacked us on Al-Qaeda, on 9/11. No, Iraq and Al-Qaeda were enemies, and you just smeared Iraq because you want to attack and said, yeah, they're all Muslims. What difference does it make, right? So now in the case of the Gaza Strip, what do they want people to do? They want Hamas to go into the middle of a desert. I don't even know if it exists, right? I don't know exactly they lay out in the topography of Gaza Strip. In the middle of the desert and plant a flag and go, this is where we'll fire the rockets from, Israel. Who would do that? Of course they're not gonna do that. That's like the British saying to the American colonies, you guys are fighting an unfair revolutionary war here. You're hiding in the trees and you're doing surprise attacks, which is what we did all the time because they had superior forces. You know what the British called us? Terrorists, right? And so now, and you're hiding among the civilians. Well, where the hell else am I gonna hide? You have the superior forces. And it's not a matter of hiding, guys. There is no force on earth that would put something in the middle of a desert and go, here, go ahead, bomb here, right? And so if they had an actual country, they would do what Israel does, and Israel has a massive military, right? They would have whole different installations that were incredibly well protected, so they wouldn't have to be anywhere near civilians. And by the way, Hamas could use the same excuse. They're too dumb, right? But they could say, well, I was firing towards Israelis' military installations. They happen to land elsewhere because our rockets suck, which would actually be true. Now, it's not true because they're firing indiscriminately into Israel, right? But they could at least make that claim because Israel's claim is just as untrue, yet they use it for propaganda and every outlet prints it. Overall, pretty good job by the media. Just want to be fair, right? But yes, they obligatorily print out Israeli propaganda. Without mentioning, it's an open air prison and there's nowhere for anyone to go. They say, they're only hitting them because it's Hamas's fault. The victim had it, the Palestinians had it coming. If they didn't wear that skirt, we wouldn't have had to do what we did. If they weren't in an open air prison that we put them into and didn't have it coming, well, we wouldn't have to kill their children. No, you're making an active choice to do that. There's no question. And by the way, let's be super clear. Again, I want to remind everybody in every story, Netanyahu did this for his own political purposes. He couldn't form a government. The other side was about to form a government, or certainly was going to attempt one, and might have used an Arab voting bloc within Israel. Now using the Arab voting bloc has become nearly impossible. This is 100% for Netanyahu's political career, let alone his corruption charges, etc. And we're all going around as if it's a legitimate thing to murder kids so that Netanyahu has a better chance of retaining power. It is disgusting, and anybody in the Biden administration, which includes almost all of them, that has supported this throughout is also disgusting and ruins America's morals, let alone Israel's.
You know, the asymmetry that you're referring to, Cenk, is always depicted in the number of civilian casualties, right? So if you look at the civilian casualties on the Palestinian side versus the Israeli side, you'll notice that there's a huge disparity, and it's because of both the military capabilities and also the way that Israel has the ability to protect itself with advanced technology, with advanced weaponry, with things like the Iron Dome. Whereas you're right, in Gaza, there is really no protection. And so you hear the same excuse being used over and over again in regard to Hamas, but even if there's evidence, and I think in some cases, and we'll talk about this later in greater detail, there's really a lack of evidence, and I'm suspicious of some of the claims regarding Hamas. But even if there's abundant evidence indicating that Hamas is hiding out in a building, that building has a bunch of civilian children and women in it, just civilians, period. How do you still justify bombing that building knowing that hundreds of civilians are gonna die? That's just not a good enough excuse, especially when you look at the military capability of Hamas, the weaponry that Hamas has. Come on, I mean, it's just, Hamas is not posing, in many cases, an imminent threat to the Israelis. They've been firing rockets, that is true, but there's a reason why the number of casualties on the Israeli side is about 10, whereas on the Palestinian side, well, let me give you the numbers as of Monday morning today. Right, the numbers are higher at this point. But as of Monday morning Eastern time, the death toll in Gaza has climbed to a total of 197, including at least 58 children and 38 women, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. Since the beginning of the Israeli airstrikes on Gaza this week, at least 1,235 Palestinians have been injured, with the number expected to rise. I have no doubt that the number of casualties has already gone up since I produced this story. On the Israeli side, 10 Israelis have been killed by rockets fired from Gaza, according to the Israeli Defense Force. But let's also acknowledge the fact that there was an opportunity to engage in a ceasefire last week. Hamas agreed to it. There was mounting pressure for the Israeli government to agree to it, but Benjamin Netanyahu said no. Possibly for the reasons that Cenk mentioned earlier, the political reasons and Netanyahu's own self-interest. And what gets to me is the fact that people like this exist, right? That people like Netanyahu don't care about the deaths of civilian children. Like they don't, as long as it helps his political career, that's all that matters. Yes. I can't get past that.
Yeah, sometimes I despair of humanity. I mean, so the Israeli people, you have elections. You're okay with this? And I guess so. 500 and some odd children last in 2014. Look, guys, let me ask you a question.
550 to be specific.
558 this time. And you know what Netanyahu says? Like we're going to keep going until basically what he's saying is until they learn their lesson. It's not about learning a lesson. What lesson? What? What's the lesson to learn? Understand that we're going to enslave you for all of time and never end the occupation. And you will be lesser than us and inferior to us and not have rights and not have a country. That's the lesson you want them to learn, right? By the way, supporting the occupation is total moral depravity. Saying that the Palestinians cannot be free for over 50 years because all they understand is violence means all you understand is violence and you don't mind killing those kids over and over and over again. Look, it's a brutal fact and it makes people super uncomfortable. But you know what's more uncomfortable? Having bombs drop on top of kids and incinerate them. That's very uncomfortable. So if I've made you uncomfortable, because in your justifications in your head for whatever reason, that no, the Palestinians must be occupied. These inferior people are violent savages, they must be occupied. If that was your justification, and be honest, there is no other justification. Okay, it's not a 3-year occupation, it's a 54-year occupation. And by some counts, obviously could be longer than that. All right, so look, the question I was gonna ask you guys, and maybe some of you will answer it differently. I guarantee you that some conservatives will answer it differently. What if someone's firing at your house? Now you're scared to death for your kids. I mean, they're firing like as in, in this analogy, a gun, right? You wanna protect your family. But you know that the house that they're firing from, if you bomb it, the threat will be gone. First of all, that's not even the right analogy here because the threat won't be gone because the threat is based on the occupation. But let's grant that, the threat will be gone. But inside the house is the guy doing the shooting and 4 kids. Would you drop a bomb on that house? I guarantee you a lot of conservatives say, no, hiding in the bathtub, waiting for the police, all these things are not good enough. I dropped a bomb in a second to protect my family. Okay, and that's what a lot of Israelis say now. I wouldn't murder those 4 kids. You're making an active decision. Yes, I'm going to kill that 4-year-old boy, that 7-year-old girl, that 13-year-old girl, and that 15-year-old boy. I'm going to kill them because I have some threat. And by the way, again, the death toll in the actual real world is 10 Israelis and nearly 200 Palestinians, right? So some amount of threat. And a lot of people say, no, Jake, I'm glad you asked that analogy. No, I'm perfectly comfortable killing those 4 kids. Hey, you know what? That guy shouldn't have hit among the 4 kids. It's on his head, it's not on my head. I killed him instantly and I protected people in my house from 5% chance of dying. In the real world, 0.00001% chance of dying, whatever the number is. And I'm comfortable murdering those kids. I'm not. I'm not. And so as an American citizen and American voter, I'm not comfortable with the brutal occupation and constant killing of Palestinians and their children.
Well, we need to talk about what else happened over the weekend, because it wasn't just Palestinian civilians who had to suffer. You also have media based in the Gaza Strip that had to deal with the violence themselves. So, Israeli airstrikes destroyed a high-rise building in Gaza that several media outlets operate out of, including the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. According to the AP president and CEO, Gary Pruitt, the situation was incredibly awful. You can tell that there's a lot of anger about this. We are shocked and horrified that the Israeli military would target and destroy the building housing AP's bureau and other news organizations in Gaza. We have long known the location of our They have long known the location of our bureau, and new journalists were there. We received a warning that the building would be hit, and once it was hit, this is what the scene looked like.
God. That is the Al Jallah Tower. That tower is where Al Jazeera's offices were housed. The Associated Press offices were also housed in that building.
Fortunately, no journalist was harmed, and they were offered a different space to work out of thanks to the wire service that operates in France, the AFP. So they're sharing office space now because they want to continue doing their reporting on the ground. Gary Pruitt, the AP president and CEO, also said, "This is an incredibly disturbing development. We narrowly avoided a terrible loss of life. A dozen AP journalists and freelancers were inside the building, and thankfully we were able to evacuate them in time. The world will know less about what's happening in Gaza because of what happened today." Now, that again was his statement shortly after the tower was hit with an Israeli airstrike. So there's now a debate about whether or not Israel had any evidence that Hamas was operating out of that building, because their excuse for striking it was that Hamas was operating out of that building. The Associated Press is demanding evidence of that. The IDF is honestly really struggling to make people believe that they had evidence of that. But even if they did, does it make sense to strike a building that civilians are in, that international journalists are operating out of? And also, how come these journalists weren't given an opportunity to take their equipment with them? The owner of the building was on the phone with the Israeli military, begging them to allow the journalists to take their equipment, and unfortunately, they were not given that opportunity.
Yeah, look, people in Washington play childish games. Oh, maybe there was Hamas. There's a former AP reporter back from 2014 that said that Hamas might have fired rockets from near there. This is 7 years later. That's the best evidence you have? 7 years later. A former reporter at some point. And then they said, oh no, we gave the evidence to the United States government. And quote, I understand they found the explanation satisfactory. Oh, did they? Oh, first of all, it's a joke. Right? Oh, I told my best friend that the reason I punched that guy in the face was XYZ, and he found my explanation satisfactory. Yeah, of course he did. He's your best friend. US backs Israel 100% on every single issue. Right now, the United Nations, 14 out of 15 members of the Security Council are trying to pass a resolution trying to stop the bloodshed in Israel, not even condemning Israel yet. Hey, just can we stop the fighting?
Demanding a ceasefire.
Demanding a ceasefire, and the US is like, no. We don't want a ceasefire. We want to kill more Palestinians. We want to show them who's boss. We want to show them that they should give up any attempt at freedom. So that's what the US is doing. So the US found it satisfactory? Yeah, of course. The US is the most biased country in the world when it comes to Israel. I can name you dozens of resolutions that every other country agreed to except the United States when it comes to Israel. So this is the worst excuse ever. Now, let's talk about what the real reasons are for grown-ups who don't believe in childish propaganda.
I actually, if you don't mind, I would like to go to the interviews featuring Brian Stelter and a member of the IDF, a spokesperson, because I think it's important to hear from that spokesperson, and then Cenk, you can go off.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's watch the first.
Are you able to provide proof now that Hamas was in the building?
Not only was Hamas in the building, they were actively using it to fight against Israel. They were using the infrastructure as their command center and intelligence center. It is as you said in the beginning, we deem it to be a legitimate military target, and out of consideration for human life and for the people who work there, we chose to forfeit additional military gains by surprise attacking. And instead, we did what, of course, is the right thing to do, advance warning, and allowed everybody to clear.
Can you show us the evidence? Can you hold it up? Can you show us the pictures, the intelligence you have?
That's in process, and I'm sure that in due time, that information will be presented.
But shouldn't that have happened 24 hours ago?
Again, we've said very clearly what's in the building.
Right, but if you all knew Hamas was in the building and you're about to bomb a news bureau, you could have provided the evidence an hour or two later.
Well, it's not about bombing a news bureau. It's about the fact that Hamas systematically uses civilian infrastructure for their military purposes.
So it's the same story over and over again, and I hope you guys can be understanding toward those, myself included, who are skeptical of this so-called evidence. And I have one more video to show you featuring that spokesperson, but Cenk, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, first of all, great job by Brian Stelter. Thank you for actually pressing him on that. Normally in American media, Israeli Defense Forces will come on, lie, and every anchor will dutifully say, yes, Hamas are the terrorists, and you guys occupying them is not at all state violence. No, God bless your hearts. Thank you for bringing the truth to us. So that didn't happen here, so thank you to Brian Stelter for doing a little bit of journalism there. In terms of this guy's nonsense, we'll present the evidence later. Yeah, that's not remotely convincing, and Stelter made a good point. If you're gonna bomb the AP News Bureau and Al Jazeera's, et cetera, and you bombed this giant building and you had all this evidence all this time, you would think that maybe you would have that prepared and say, oh, it was just a tragedy to bomb the News Bureau. We didn't, that's just, it was the last thing we wanted to do, but here's your evidence right here that we had prepared. And by the way, why didn't you tell the Associated Press before? Hey, by the way, you guys are living, are in the same building as a nest of terrorists, dangerous terrorists, right? How come you didn't tell everybody else? So no, look, if you believe, this is not about Israel. If you believe the military, official military spokespeople of almost any government in the middle of a conflict, I mean, you're not very bright. Okay, the Pentagon lies 24/7 in the middle of conflicts. The Israeli Defense Forces does. Again, you can name any country, the Saudis, Turks, Iraq, Afghanistan, it doesn't matter, okay? The military says that they did, as they killed all those people, they did a perfectly great thing. As they destroyed the news bureau, they were perfectly justified. Look, guys, before we go to the next clip, they were shooting out of that building. I don't mean shooting guns or rockets. They were shooting video of the carnage in the city.
Yep.
One of the best vantage points in the city was on top of that building. That's why the Associated Press and Al Jazeera were both in that building. Among the reasons why is because they shot video of the bombs landing, Israeli bombs landing in the middle of Gaza Strip from on top of that building. And now they have no equipment, they don't have no roof because the building's gone, and they have no ability to report war crimes. If you think that has nothing to do with the fact that they bombed that particular building, now, you're so biased, you literally can't see straight. And so there's no point in trying to talk to you. Any rational human being can see that they clearly targeted the media for that specific reason.
One more video, it's the same IDF spokesperson.
Israeli intelligence has presented the intelligence to the United States, that the Biden White House knows about this intelligence. Can you confirm that report in the Jerusalem Post?
Unfortunately, I cannot. I don't know what they based that report on.
Sir, what about a timeline for the proof that you say will be provided? Today, tomorrow?
No, I cannot commit to that either. I don't know. I know that we're in the middle of fighting here. Our civilians are being bombarded by Up until now, 2,900 rockets. We have 9 dead Israeli civilians, 1 dead soldier. The country is under constant, relentless bombardment. Civilians are in shelters. 5-6 million Israeli civilians are in shelter almost the entire day. So yes, it's very important, and I understand that many people are very concerned about it. I am sure that Israeli officials will get to it as soon as possible, but now, the order of the day is to beat Hamas and to overcome the military challenges that are life-threatening for our civilians.
You know, the defense minister for Israel, Benny Gantz, very transparently, openly said that Gaza will burn. The IDF spokesperson there mentioned that there are 10 dead Israelis as a result of the rocket fire coming from Hamas, but fails to mention that there are literally hundreds of Palestinians, including women and children, Palestinian civilians who have died as a result of the relentless bombardment of airstrikes coming from the Israeli military. I think that context matters. And real quick, what Brian Stelter was referring to at the very beginning of that clip was an article that was published by the Jerusalem Post. The headline is, Israel showed us smoking gun on Hamas in AP office tower, officials say. But what's also fascinating about this is that Anthony Blinken, who's Secretary of State and is certainly not a fan of the Palestinians, has not done anything to defend them and has only gone out to bat for the Israeli government, said this. Breaking, US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says he has not seen any Israeli evidence of Hamas operating in a Gaza office building that Israel destroyed in an airstrike. The building housed the Associated Press, broadcaster Al Jazeera, and other media.
If you can't get Blinken to confirm what you're saying, that means you never presented any evidence. It missed the Secretary of State, the United States Secretary of State, the evidence, secret evidence that you presented and claimed on their behalf they were satisfied with. Then Blinken actually comes out, a 1,000,000,000% supporter of Israeli right-wing government, and comes out and goes, nah, I didn't see any evidence. Okay, honestly, they should, again, Stelter did a great job of questioning there, but they honestly shouldn't even have the IDF spokesperson there. It's totally useless. You're never gonna get anything but propaganda. Here, I'll ask you a question. Would it be okay to have Hamas's military leader or military spokesperson on there saying, the Israelis had it coming, and that, and the kid that we killed, they killed 10 people, one of them was a kid in Israel. It was a legitimate military strike, and you know what? The kid shouldn't have been there. Israelis are hiding behind their kids, and so we were right to do it, and it's all Israel's fault. No, people would say, no, you can't. That get terrorist, right? So, and here's another thing I'm done with: the word terrorist. So when you have no power, you're a terrorist. When the state crushes you, you're a terrorist. When you have all the power in the world and you drop any bomb you like on any family you like, you're not a terrorist. Wait, the states, America, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, you name it. The states kill way more than the so-called terrorists. They kill way more civilians than the so-called terrorists. And then they say, no, the powerless are the ones that deserve their deaths, and we will call them terrorists, okay? And us, we are legitimate state actors, and we are to be cherished. And if we kill civilians, it doesn't count. It only counts when they kill civilians. No, you guys are all liars. So I'm here to tell you the reality. No, both sides kill civilians, and in every conflict of my lifetime, Israel has killed 10, 20, sometimes 100 times more civilians, and then pretended that the other side are the terrorists, and for the specific reason of killing civilians. If you can't see the lie in that, you're trying super hard not to. So you can come out with me with all these things of, no, I'm gonna call you dirty words. I don't care. I care about those kids. And if you don't care about them, all those civilians and all those kids being killed, there's something morally wrong with you.
We got to take a break.
Before we go to the break, sure. Anna, sorry.
Yeah.
I want to make a clarification on a story I did a couple of days ago. So we had a video of extreme Israeli right-wing folks in the streets dancing and celebrating, saying the Palestinians must be erased. And it appeared that the Al-Aqsa mosque was burning in the background, and that's what I stated. We found out that that was not the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It was a nearby tree. It was by the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They were in fact chanting that phrase, and they were happy, presumably, about the state of affairs, but it was not Al-Aqsa Mosque. I wanna make sure we get it right. I'm sorry that we didn't get it right in that instance, but we care about the facts. So we'll be right back. We have more on this, including US reaction. All right, back on the Young Turks. First, our member section, as always. Mickey C, the silver-haired dragon, says, Bibi's trial for fraud, bribery, breach of trust, and other corruptions was supposed to start. How convenient is it that it had to be postponed again? Of course. The guy's the most obviously corrupt guy in the world. Well, I wouldn't say in the world. There's Kim Jong-un and there's others, but he's not in good company, let's put it that way. Witchy woman says, if Israel doesn't have a government, why the hell aren't the Israeli people all out rioting? When what lies are they being fed? No, it's the parliamentary system is different than ours. So they take a while to form their governments, and the old government continues at that point. So they understand that the forming of the government has been delayed. Unfortunately, not a lot of people in the press put those two things together, because Mickey's right, we're right when we talk about the corruption and the forming of the government being obvious factors. But part of the reason press doesn't like to do that is they don't like to tell you about the potentially bad motives and bad intent of politicians. They think that's very rude. Okay, the mathematician says, Cenk, I despaired of humanity 20 years ago. It's better to do that while young so you can keep fighting hardest before your body collapses under you. No, guys, look, the war crimes that we've all committed against each other endlessly, it's impossible not to despair of humanity, but there is hope. We will get to that hope, but right now in Israel and Gaza, that hope is very faint. Just being honest with you, okay? The crass rebuttal says, established media is very, very slowly starting to figure out journalism again, but by the time they do, it'll be too late because TYT will have taken over. Well, I hope both of those things are right. I hope they are figuring out journalism again, or for the first time, and I hope we do take over so we can show them how. Speaking of our takeover, backed by you guys, and pretty much only you guys. So here are the folks who just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. Isabel Kelly, Moby Cosme, Nathan Krasner, Brisk 400, and Vortex Dragon. Thank you guys so much, we appreciate it. Membership makes this show possible, and your help to bring truth and positive change in the world. All right, Sophia Smirnoff with a critique on YouTube Super Chat says, oh, of course you call IDF propaganda, but Hamas is not propaganda. You could be more subtle with your bias and one-sided news. Sophia, who said we didn't? We said Hamas was not propaganda. Hamas is propaganda. They're one of the combatants in this conflict. If you just blindly believe Hamas, you're nuts. Of course they're gonna give you, at a minimum, their side of it, and oftentimes they will very much lie. Be even-handed on both sides. Prasanna Abhyanthirna, sorry, butchered that name. Anyway, says, how are the Zionists different from the Nazis? Military might and lack of care for humanity in both of these people. No, that's not fair. The Nazis killed 6 million people, and they didn't bother telling the people get out of the building. Okay, there is a difference. Let's not go to extremes. At the same time, it's still outrageous. It's okay to be outraged by it without going to those extremes. We'll be back. right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Unfortunately, more news on the Israeli-Palestinian issue.
There are growing calls for the United States to demand an immediate ceasefire in the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, but the White House had been resisting and to some extent continues to resist those calls. Now, Biden, just before we went on air, said that he is supportive of a ceasefire, but continued to distance himself from the Democratic senators who have urged an immediate ceasefire. And that group of nearly 30 Senate Democrats issued a joint statement late Sunday calling for an immediate ceasefire as Israel intensified its bombing campaign in the occupied Gaza Strip throughout the weekend. Now, Jon Ossoff, who is, not some strong progressive, is the one who really led the charge in gathering the Democratic senators to urge for this immediate ceasefire. And it says, to prevent any further loss of civilian life and to prevent further escalation of conflict in Israel and the Palestinian territories, we urge an immediate ceasefire, reads the brief statement, which was led by Senators Jon Ossoff and signed by 29 members of the Senate Democratic Caucus, including Senators Bernie Sanders and Angus King, an independent from Maine. Cenk.
Okay, so terrific to see Ossoff and Bernie Sanders and the others leading that charge. And just a heartfelt thank you for representing everyone as usual. And some portions of the Israeli lobby called Bernie Sanders anti-Semitic during his 2020 presidential run, as we predicted they would in this show. Of course, Bernie Sanders is the most successful Jewish candidate for president in American history, and he's wonderful in fighting for everyone and people he doesn't know, okay? And so, and it's shocking that there are 30 US senators willing to say to Israel, even something as simple as please stop bombing them.
Right.
That is unprecedented. And so credit to Ossoff for leading that charge as well. Bernie had a great op-ed about it as well. So that is Profiles in Courage, because it's a big sea change in Washington. Biden is super late to the party and on purpose. The United Nations had a resolution, we blocked it. People have been calling for Biden to say ceasefire. Just say ceasefire, it's the simplest thing in the world. It doesn't even mean anything, and you know the Israelis won't do it. It means absolutely nothing. Just for God's sake, just say the word ceasefire. And he would not do it all of these days. When he refuses that blatantly to say ceasefire, what he's saying is green light. Keep killing them. Keep bombing civilians. 58 kids dead, keep going, keep going, keep going. And after pressure mounted today, finally Biden was like, okay, fine, ceasefire.
He says he expressed support for
express support. And like I said, it doesn't mean anything. They're not gonna actually do a ceasefire. Israel's not gonna stop. Biden already told them on the phone, you're all good, brother. Well, we're gonna back you 100%. Publicly, he has backed them 100%. Now when he says, we will support a ceasefire. Okay, are you gonna support the UN resolution for a ceasefire? No, of course not, you're gonna veto it. 14 out of 15 members of the Security Council say yes. America says no. Israel can do no wrong. Why do you kill all those civilians? Because you know you have impunity. It's like the police in America. They know they're above the law. They can kill anyone they like and get away with it until very recently. So now Israel thinks, Biden gave me the green light. I can kill with impunity and no force on earth can stop me, and that's literal.
So a few things to mention here. And I've mentioned this in the context of other stories that we've done on this conflict, but just last week, Hamas had agreed to a ceasefire. Really, it's the Israeli government that refuses to engage in a ceasefire. They want to continue, they want to keep going. So while on one hand, you hear the talking points about how, well, Hamas is firing rockets and we need to do this to protect our civilians. In reality, they're putting their civilians in danger by refusing to engage in this ceasefire that was available to them just last week. So they're continuing with this. And in regard to Joe Biden, Cenk, let's also be clear that while he has now finally expressed some support for a ceasefire, just today it was reported that the Biden administration approved $735 million in weapons sales to Israel, raising red flags for some House Democrats who might think maybe this is a bad idea, just selling these weapons and not conditioning our foreign aid to Israel as they brutalize civilians in the Gaza Strip. By the way, there's now some evidence that they're also attacking protesters in Lebanon, pro-Palestinian protesters in Lebanon. So this conflict could expand to something even worse than what we're seeing. And there have been some strikes in the West Bank as well. So a few Palestinians, it's being reported now, have died as a result of those airstrikes. One other thing I wanted to quickly mention, Biden not only, says or refused previously to say that he supported a ceasefire. The only statement that we would get from Biden and from Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was that Israel has the right to defend itself, followed with nothing recognizing or acknowledging the loss of civilian lives on the Palestinian side. So that's an important piece of context. One other thing we should do is listen to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who was asked about a possible ceasefire and this conflict. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
You and President Biden have called for de-escalation in the conflict in Israel and Gaza, and it seems like quite the opposite has happened. What do you think about that? Would you support a United Nations Security Council statement immediately to call for a ceasefire?
We have been working around the clock through diplomatic channels to try to bring an end to the conflict. In all of these engagements, we've made clear that we are prepared to lend our support and good offices to the parties should they seek a ceasefire. And that's precisely the message I think you heard from Ambassador Thomas Greenfield during the UN session yesterday. Any diplomatic initiative that advances that prospect is something that we'll support. And we're, again, willing and ready to do that. But ultimately, it is up to the parties to make clear that they want to pursue a ceasefire. Any ceasefire would be, by definition, between them, but we're ready to engage to support it. Meanwhile, we are working tirelessly across every diplomatic channel we have to advance the prospect of getting to calm.
Again, let's be clear, one party has agreed to a ceasefire, that's Hamas. One party refuses to agree to a ceasefire, and that's the Israeli government. It's also worth noting, Cenk, that while I got a lot of hate from corporate Democrats for having the audacity to talk about the conflicts of interest of members of Biden's administration, the fact of the matter is Anthony Blinken, when he left the Obama administration, founded a consulting group, just a euphemism for lobbying group, that had all sorts of clients that they refused to be transparent about. But one of the people working there, one of the top people working there, was a former ambassador to Israel. His name is Daniel B. Shapiro, former US ambassador to Israel and former White House National Security Council senior director. I mention him because this is someone who clearly worked very closely with Anthony Blinken over at West Exec. That's the consulting group that he founded. And they, on their website, like to feature all of the different press that they've received. Dan Shapiro was quoted several times in the Jerusalem Post. In one article, military assistance to Israel also serves US interests. And this is important, right? Because I want you guys to not only understand the conflicts of interest once you have former lobbyists and former think tank founders and former corporatists in the administration, I want you to also understand the thinking behind supporting Israel. Because I mentioned that transfer of wealth, right? How our taxpayer money goes toward the military funding in Israel, and then what do they do with that money? They buy our weaponry. It's a transfer of wealth from the US taxpayers, workers in this country, to the very corporations that always have an interest in war. So he said in this Jerusalem Post article in November of 2019, and I'm talking about Dan Shapiro, there's an enormous amount of sharing of intelligence, said the former ambassador. Israeli intelligence has high quality technology. Israeli technology is high quality. Joint training, our forces training with Israel and learning from them as they learn from us, benefits. And this relationship flow both ways. And so in that regard, the US assistance program to Israel is not an act of altruism. And he continues.
Well, that part is true because it's not altruistic to kill all those Palestinian civilians, but
exactly.
Keep going.
So two more quotes for you. while it is certainly generous on the part of the American taxpayers, and we should feel good about it.
Feel great about it, yeah.
And it has saved many lives, particularly with programs like Iron Dome. It is also something that very much serves our interests.
That's total nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay, the Iron Dome did protect civilian lives. I'm happy about that. That's the only part of that that's correct, okay? The bombs and the F-35s, the F-16s, you name it, all those things that we sell to Israel do not go towards protecting civilians. It goes towards bombing and killing civilians. So this is all just gobbledygook. And hey, listen, Boeing got paid, Lockheed Martin got paid, we all got paid. We all got paid. Booz Allen Hamilton got paid. Everybody got paid, okay? Everybody in Washington is incredibly rich. So they call themselves strategic consultants, Blinken and the rest that worked at West Exec. Why? Because if you're a lobbyist or you are working for a foreign government, you have to register as a lobbyist, and then a whole bunch of rules kick in because they all lied and said, oh yeah, people that work for Obama, we're not gonna go be lobbyists. And then they're like, okay, we are strategic consultants. And then they also don't wanna be registered as foreign agents.
Right.
And so what they do is they could say we're consultants so we don't have to register. Now, two sets of people come on and give us tons and tons and tons of money because we have influence, and we're gonna go through the revolving door and back into government, and we'll do you giant favors, and everybody knows that's the game in Washington. Anyone denying that is totally, utterly full of crap so they can sleep at night, right? One is foreign governments. They funnel money to think tanks, they funnel money to lobbyists, and yes, they funnel money to strategic consultants. And that's a way for foreign governments to just buy our government, knowing that there's a revolving door. But actually the bigger problem is defense contractors. And defense contractors go and go, oh, you have this very important expertise and stuff. We'll put you on our board, which Flournoy, which is one of the main partners, she's one of the main partners at West Exec, is on a board of a defense contractor. And they go, here's millions of dollars we're pouring into you consultants. Oh, look at that. You come back out and then you're in favor of more war. What a fun coincidence for us. We all get rich, everybody dies all across the world. The stuff they do in Washington, it's the stuff of horror movies.
Yep.
We just put a pretty face on it with people in nice suits. That gobbledygook that he just told you Blinken did about the ceasefire, well, it sounded like he was supportive of a ceasefire. No, he was using legalese diplomatic words for saying we are not calling for a ceasefire. If both parties want a ceasefire, the Palestinians already do. In other words, if Israel doesn't want a ceasefire, we're not gonna say ceasefire. Because what are we? What did we working for the US government? Don't be ridiculous. Oh, you can't question, blah, blah, blah. Come on, guys. If you live in Washington, telling the rest of us that millions of dollars don't affect people, that's cute. And you guys live in a fantasy world where you've all convinced yourselves that that's true enough that you can sleep at night. The rest of the country doesn't believe you at all. We think you're totally influenced by the millions of dollars that you put in your pocket to support these wars, and whether they're starting them or continuing them. Now,
one more quote.
Okay.
This is the quote that this is everything. Okay, and then I'll stop. So again, from Dan Shapiro, who worked closely with Anthony Blinken at West Exec. At the beginning of the fiscal year, the funds, meaning funds to Israel, the funds are provided to Israel, and almost all those funds go into long-term purchases of major US military systems, F-15, F-16, F-35, various helicopter platforms, tanks, and various munitions. The vast majority material is really aimed to counter, not threats that emerge from the Palestinian arena, although somewhat you could argue from Gaza, but from Syria, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Iran, the future or the further future threats, and certainly the missile defense programs also fall very much into that category.
Yeah, more euphemisms. In other words, yes, we will bomb the living crap out of Gaza. Yes, we will bomb Lebanon with American-made weapons, but don't worry, Lockheed Martin got paid, or whichever defense contractor. And so again, they all got rich though, so bless their hearts for caring so much about all. They don't even pretend to care about peace. Let's move on. So look, there is a sea change in that now finally people are willing to say Palestinians are human beings. That is a giant change in America. Before they were all called terrorists, basically. They were never right. They were never right in the media. They were never right in Congress. They were all terrorists that had it coming, right? Now, one thing that's affected is more videos. Videos of dead kids Kids with the bomb just destroyed their house. The dad who lost 3 of his kids and 4 of his
kids,
and the nephews and nieces, right? And so 8 kids overall. And you see the pictures and you see the video and you go, oh, it turns out they are human. We were led to believe they were all terrorists by our media, by our Congress. It turns out we are actually killing human beings, 4-year-olds, babies, 8-year-olds. We're killing all of them, right? And so that is a sea change and it makes a big difference. But let's go back to Congress. So on the other hand, you have Tom Cotton, who just came out and said the Associated Press is a bunch of whiny reporters, quote, whiny reporters, because the building that they were housed in was blown up by the Israeli Defense Forces. So now, of course, every victim must be blamed. So the Palestinians were victims, so they were terrorists. The Associated Press now is victims because their building was bombed. And now they're no longer media, they're whiny reporters who were at fault. Tom Cotton says the Associated Press should have told Israeli Defense Forces about whatever things they might or might not have known about Hamas. Otherwise, their building should be bombed. Don't whine about us, destroying your entire building or killing the families. Don't whine about it. We're just killing you. What's all the whining about? Well, okay, if you're a bloodthirsty murderer like Tom Cotton, who in effect in his policies, guys, Tom Cotton doesn't go to anybody's house and kill them, right? But when they say yes, we want Israel or Turkey or any other country, Saudi Arabia and Yemen, yes, we are in favor of their current policy, which is death and destruction. It is murder either way. Those people actually die. The grandmothers actually die, the kids actually die. All right, last thing. Now, there are those missiles that we sold, the weapons that we just sold Israel, that deal happened on May 5th. Now, you're telling me that Israel did not plan the Al-Aqsa Mosque raid right after they got $735 billion in weapons. Like, does anybody really believe that? Like that it was the Palestinians after the Israelis got more weapons. Let's start a fight, right? No, we saw that Netanyahu's forces attacked Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now that doesn't mean that they got the weapons right away. They don't get them on May 6th. We can actually still block the sale, right? But they know that sale's not going to get blocked. So they've secured that weaponry. Now they can attack. And so the timing, in my opinion, and in the opinion of anyone following the fact pattern here, is fairly clear. And finally, since we are still within a time period where Congress can object to those weapon sales, as we did in Yemen, which Congress should get a lot of credit for, it would still be a non-binding resolution and Biden could override it, but they could do a resolution saying that we should not sell these weapons to Israel if this is how they're going to use it. We will not do that. So no matter how many 30 Democratic senators there are, no matter how many folks that are doing a wonderful job of protesting these actions in the House, they're not going to get majorities. Pelosi's not going to agree to it. Schumer's not going to agree to it. Nobody in Democratic leadership is going to agree to it. They will continue the bombings. They will continue the weapon sales. People will continue to get rich, especially the defense contractors. And those kids will continue to die. Because at the end of the day, the American government is never, ever, ever going to hold the Israeli government accountable, no matter what they do, no matter how right-wing they are, no matter how much they're led by a guy who's a combination of Dick Cheney and Donald Trump. No, even Democrats at the end of the day will still say, proceed. You have a blank check to do anything you want. And here it is. By the way, the blank check provided by the American taxpayers. We give 3.8 billion on top, we give the weapons on top, and we give the green light on top. So when you see those dead families in Palestine, we did that.
When we come back from the break for our next segment, we'll talk a little bit about what's happening in the Biden administration regarding pressure to move away from bold domestic policy that actually helps workers. We have that and more when we come back.
we're back. Let me read a bunch of comments here that are good from our member section. I Am Sock writes in, shouldn't we be concerned about the evangelical Christians who make up a bulk of the Republican Party that want to support Israel in order to bring about the end of the world? Well, that is literally true. That is what they are trying to do. It's insanity. Previously in the American media, you're not allowed to say that because you would offend the nuts that are in the right-wing evangelical movement. I don't mind offending them with the truth. The truth is, if you think that creating World War III and Armageddon from Israel and Palestine is going to bring about Jesus Christ, you are a lunatic of the highest order. You should check yourself into a mental health clinic. And yes, they do the greatest damage in this situation. People misunderstand it oftentimes. They think, oh, it's Jewish Americans that are backing Israel, that's the issue. No, look, there's a wide variety of folks that give different things, votes, money, etc., to different politicians and different things. So it's not that that never happens, right? But the bigger issue here is the evangelical Christians on the Republican side, and they're not doing it because of the Judeo-Christian heritage. A rabbi once told me, yeah, I don't remember this Judeo-Christian stuff from like 40 years ago or 50 years ago. That's a new invention to make it seem like, oh yeah, we're one people. Now let's make sure that the end of the world begins in Israel. Okay, so thank you for being educated and understanding that's the core of the problem politically here in America. Hapless Harry chips in by saying, let's hear what evangelicals have to say about the senseless slaughter of innocent men, women, and children. Sound of crickets, crickets, and more crickets. They still need Israel for their end times fantasy. That's right. What happened to pro-life movement? Kids, the babies. Okay, babies are being bombed, and you're all here for it because you think it's going to bring out Jesus Christ from the sky. Okay, whatever. I'm tired of babying them. There is no end times. Jesus is not going to come back. He's not going to suck you up into a vacuum. If you believe that, you're nuts. You're totally nuts. It's not, you're detached from reality. Okay, JL Sands, thank you for joining by hitting the join button below on YouTube. Thank you, we appreciate it. I think on a different note, at least, Jay Fergie wrote in on Super Chat, Skater Dragon here to thank Anna. I used your what is the GOP doing to improve your life during a chat with a conservative friend. It led to a great talk and him walking away a little more open to some progressive ideas.
Yes.
Will you look at that? Okay.
I needed that, thank you. I needed that.
Yeah, and you guys are wonderful. Elvis's cat wrote in, thank you, Cenk, Anna, and the TYT team. AJ Goebel wrote in, I've been watching you guys for years, you're number one. AJ, thank you. So we're gonna take a break. We'll be right back. Thank you, guys. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. All right, on to domestic politics.
All right. Axios is ringing the alarm over Biden's so-called generous domestic policy proposals, essentially repeating lines from the US Chamber of Commerce while also simultaneously citing someone as deplorable as Larry Summers for these arguments. They write that some Democrats and economists have begun to worry that President Biden, intent on FDR-like transformation of a wounded America, is doing too much too fast. Some economists fear that all this spending will crank up inflation and put Biden's economic legacy at risk. Really, which ones? Like, which economists are we citing here? Who are we talking about? Because the only person cited by name in this very short article was Larry Summers. Larry Summers, who was Treasury Secretary under President Bill Clinton and started warning about inflation in February, told Axios he's more concerned than he was several months ago. If the spending is coming up front and the taxes are going down the road or coming down the road, he says, then on net, that's going to add fuel to the fire. Look, let's keep it real. Larry Summers does not like the idea of government spending on programs that actually help workers, especially when he knows that people like him will likely have to pay more in taxes. And Axios, I should note, didn't bother at all countering the narrative coming from the likes of Larry Summers. Just decided to print what he had to say and just let it stand without doing any type of investigation, any type of questioning into whether or not his narrative is accurate. One of the things, Cenk, that I'm sure you know about, we've talked about it on this show, is this notion that the unemployment benefits have just been too generous, and as a result, there's been a labor shortage. But if you actually look at the numbers and you understand why some workers have left the labor market, the story is very different from what these corporate interests would have you believe. So real quick, I'm just gonna share this data with you and then I wanna hear what you have to say. So Matt Bruenig over at the People's Policy Project found some interesting stats. Matt Bruenig also shares data that corporate Democrats despise, which is why they're so vicious against him and his wife, Elizabeth Bruenig. But here's what he found. We see that just under 6.5 million people newly found employment in March. In April, that number shot up to 6.9 million people who newly found employment. More job seekers are finding jobs than before, which is at odds with the idea that people who are out of work have become especially reluctant to come into work due to unemployment benefits or similar. The increase in new employment has, however, completely overwhelmed by the number of people who went from employed to unemployed and people who went from employed to not in the labor force. These are people known as NILFs. And so the number of people moving into NILF status grew by an especially large amount. Importantly, NILFs are ineligible for unemployment benefits. And so this figure is at odds with the idea that unemployment benefits are a major driver of recent labor market dynamics. So who are the NILFs? Who are the people who are no longer, I know it's a funny word, but no longer in the labor force, you guys get it. Who are these people who have left the labor force? Turns out they're women, folks. I wonder why. So the number of women moving out of employment and into NILF status increased by a large amount from 1.8 million to over 2.5 million, while the same number actually decreased for men from 2 million to 1.8 million. Insofar as dropping out of work to take care of kids is more typical of women than men, these figures suggest that taking care of kids is the primary reason why NILF status increased last month and the primary reason why net employment growth declined last month.
Yeah, look, it's a long way of saying the numbers just don't bear that out at all. This nonstop talking point they have of Americans are lazy and they'd rather just sit at home and collect unemployment checks. The CEOs and executives are wonderful, hardworking people, but the rest of you are all bums. Remember, they all originally were fired. They didn't choose to go on unemployment. They were fired because of this catastrophe in the pandemic. And by the way, Axios' reporting on this one is that it says there's loads of anecdotal evidence.
Well, you know how anecdotal evidence is really all you need to determine what the real issue is.
Yeah, and I'm curious what they mean by loads of anecdotal evidence. My guess is they at the cocktail party and the advertising meetings that they had, their executive friends told them, oh my God, people aren't coming back to work. Really, are your employees not coming back to work? No, but I hear. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence floating in the sky, especially when you have giant advertisers that are huge corporations. Okay, now, two pieces of unexpectedly interesting news, and then I want to get back to Larry Summers' nonsense. And Axios' too. So some Democrats have apparently, this is at the bottom of what Axios is reporting, are now saying, well, if the economy is doing great and you're worried about inflation, et cetera, and now I'm putting some words in their mouth, I wish they said more of this, but the bottom line is they are saying, well, then you better raise taxes too, right? You don't want to overheat the economy, right? If you're gonna add spending, then at least increase taxes on those corporations. That'll both cool off the economy theoretically, right? And bring more money into the government to pay for those for that spending. It makes a lot of sense. So finally, there are some Democrats in Congress that apparently know what they're talking about and are actually making a sane economic point. They're at the bottom of the article, but hey. And here is a credit I would not have expected to give to Larry Summers. His last quote actually did make sense. We're fair, we actually look at the facts. What did they say? Does it make sense or doesn't it? At the end, he said, I think it's bizarre to be buying $40 billion a month of mortgage securities when the housing market is on fire. So that's actually a good point by Larry Summers. Why is the Fed pumping in all of that money into mortgage securities if you're worried about inflation, if you're worried about the housing market overheating, et cetera? And the reason is because the Fed is run by the banks. The New York Federal Reserve, which is the most important part of the Federal Reserve overall, is run by the giant banks in New York. So they print money and give it to themselves. Of course, the fact that that has never been talked about is insane. Now, back to the main point. So Larry Summers and other so-called economists, because Axios says some economists, and then they write the giant headline, Biden's danger, the great overreaction, giving people, American people, too much money. Now notice they weren't worried about an overreaction when we were printing $4 trillion to give it to the largest corporations last year.
Of course not.
That is not when Larry Summers was concerned about overheating the market. When they were printing and giving trillions to the largest corporations in the world, nobody was in Washington was concerned. There were no economists that Axios could find that was concerned about printing all that money. They remember there's the Treasury money and then there's the money from the Federal Reserve. And to the tune of, there's about 2 trillion from Congress and about 4 trillion from the Fed. And at that point, 6 trillion, no, nobody's worried about it. Now, we did a stimulus plan of 1.9 trillion. And to be fair, the majority of that went actually to the American people. It was shocking, that almost never happens, and certainly wouldn't have happened under Trump and the Republicans. But okay, so that happened. Now all of a sudden, oh, it's overheated. Oh, that went to actually the plebeian, the masses? No, overheated. Oh, you're thinking of doing something that would affect the environment and get renewable energy and doing infrastructure, and all of it wouldn't go to corporations? Overheated. Yep. Stop it. Now, instead, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start squeezing you guys, lower spending, et cetera, and take it out of the hide of the American people. No, this is the oldest game in the book. The only reason why everybody in America doesn't already know it is because the media covers it up.
By the way, if the largest group leaving the labor force happen to be women because they need to take care of their children, wouldn't the American Families Plan, which calls for hundreds of billions of dollars of funding to childcare services, be the right approach to deal with the labor shortage? What are workers supposed to do with their kids? I want to know. I want Larry Summers to answer that question. I want to know what people are supposed to do with their responsibilities, with their kids. Are we now living in a country where you can only be wealthy and have a child? So you can't own a house, right? Inflation in housing is connected to what the Federal Reserve is doing in printing money, right? We can't have kids because there's no affordable childcare anywhere in this country right now, and we got to go to break. I get it, we got to go to break, but these important issues deserve more time, and unfortunately we're out of it. So why don't we just go to break, and then we'll come back for the second hour and discuss Ted Cruz. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Came in late to watch TYT Old School, and I hear Cenk Uygur talking about napkins. Is this the kind of nonsense Anna Kasparian was talking about? Gotta love membership privileges. Gotta love them.
Please have Dave on every 4 episodes or so.
Watching Ben Mankiewicz and Cenk Uygur on Old School talking is exactly like watching Seinfeld and George. I'm not sure if that's a compliment.
Who's on Old School today? Is there one? At Dave Kohler. I hope it's not Brett Ehrlich.
This episode of Old School has killed me. Who knew a conversation about good and bad underwear could be so hilarious and relatable?
Couple things about this video. Dave Kohler looks so badass.
There's more than a 73% chance this Old School will be really funny. Cenk Uygur has been up since 4 a.m, so he's tired. Hence, everything will seem funnier to him. P.S. Remember, food talk, new words, and no or very little politics.
Dave Kohler, enjoyed performance on Old School. Can we please hear about your time as a geologist? One geologist to another?
I appreciate that all these people enjoy it because I know Cenk loves to do it, and he does it because he knows the fans love it too.
This looks like a conspiracy. This looks like a scheme to defraud.
The Bush administration put folks into the regulatory agencies who believed in destroying regulations.
Memories of the Great Depression faded.
They stood on the floor of the Senate day after day attacking what they were trying to do.
They just generated all this junk, took home huge bonuses, and then when it collapsed, they said, oh, not us.
What they ginned up was pure extortion, putting a gun to the head of Congress.
Time and again, they heard the devastation that was happening in low and moderate income communities caused by bankers, by lenders, and they chose to ignore it.
I understood that the SEC was not merely a weakened version of what it was supposed to be. It was an agent of Wall Street.
Well, no one's enforcing the law. The criminals take over.
I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed.
The president labeled him a son of a bitch.
I don't think it's good to be a distraction to your team.
To stand proudly for the national anthem.
You know, some of these people need to move to another country.
Well, you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country.
The president is put in place to amplify the racists in this country.
Black men and boys are killed at an exponentially higher rate than white men and boys, as outlined by PBS. Black people are most likely to be killed by police, found mappingpoliceviolence.org. Personally, my biggest gripe is not seeing how sports and politics have been attached at the hip. From the jockey syndrome, to the Negro Leagues, to Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Muhammad Ali, to modern day and everything in between. This is not an escape. It is a reflection of reality and a reflection of the times.
Dog on the White House lawn, would that
I'm Mike Shekels, and I'm the Director of Technical Operations, so if you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it. This here is Johnny Greenwald.
I'm Manager of Post-Production Technology. Simplest terms is I deliver the content.
And this is our master control room. We have many, many more destinations than ever before, and we created this room to consolidate it, to make sure that everything's going out is up to standard, so we meet all of our contractual agreements.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. More news.
All right. Today is the day we find out whether Larry Krasner will be reelected as the district attorney of Philadelphia. Now, this is an important election, especially when you consider how Republicans and the police union are fighting very aggressively to ensure that he does not get reelected. In fact, John Nichols at The Nation writes that the stakes are so high because Krasner has been so outspoken in his criticism of police violence and prosecutorial misconduct, and so ardent in advancing reforms that have made his office a national model for reformers. And so what has he done so far? Why does he get this glowing complimentary coverage in The Nation? Well, he fired 31 prosecutors in his first week in office. He eliminated cash bail for people accused of many misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. He announced that his office would no longer seek criminal charges against Philadelphians caught with marijuana. He initiated a review of sentences from past prosecutions with an eye toward reducing jail terms. His conviction integrity unit exonerated a score of innocent people who'd been jailed by his predecessors. He sued big pharma companies to make them take responsibility for harm caused by the opioid epidemic. He asked the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to declare the death penalty unconstitutional. So he represents everything that the police union and conservatives despise, and they are fighting aggressively to make sure that he doesn't get to serve another term.
Yeah, this one's super important. So, by the way, it's tomorrow. So, if you live in Philly, make sure that you vote. It's really, really important. It's not like a random local election that doesn't have consequences. It has national consequences. So, he tried all these reforms. The police union despised it. The police overall hate it. They don't want to be reformed. They want to do it the old ways. Right or wrong, guilty, innocent, who cares? Let's go, let's crack some skulls, let's put him in. We don't want any accountability. This guy's a pain in our ass, he's trying to protect the citizens. Doesn't he know we're above the law? And so, of course, specifically, white cops are against Larry Krasner because minority cops are on his side. And so, that is very specific. And then they have a fake Democrat in the primary against him because Republicans can't win in Philly, so they have to put a Republican inside the Democratic primary, and then back in with tons of money from the police unions, et cetera, and then they smear Krasner. The cops, I don't know whether they bothered trying to actually fight crime. I don't know if they bothered fighting crime anywhere, really, honestly. But then they turn around and blame Krasner and say, "Oh, he might have caused the violence and crime." Well, how about you guys? Isn't that your job, is to prevent crime? No, we can't do anything, man. I mean,
such a good point, Cenk. It's such a good point because there's been an uptick in crime in Philadelphia, but there's been an uptick in crime throughout the entire country. So just to give you an example, when it comes to gun violence on average is up 45% nationally. In Philadelphia, it's up 40%, which is still horrible. But to blame the uptick in violence on one person, especially when you take a look at the broader picture and you see the uptick in violence throughout the entire country nationally, you get a sense of just how ridiculous and intentionally deceptive these talking points from the police union happen to be. In fact, I do want to read you a few quotes from the police union. The Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 5 is Philadelphia's police union, and they write that the president of this police union writes, "Our officers have given us carte blanche to spend whatever we need to spend to be able to remove this cancer." They referred to him as cancer from the district attorney's office.
Of course, because the cops busted all those people who turned out to be innocent. And Krasner let the people go when he found out that they were actually innocent, and they had evidence to show that they were innocent. Cops are like, "Oh, that's embarrassing. Oh, now you're gonna show the wrong people we arrest?" Again, remember, whenever you see Fraternal Order Police, in the case of Philly, the minority cops are all on Krasner's side. So these are only white cops who hate Krasner. Let's be clear about that.
And the Philadelphia Inquirer, which by the way has endorsed Krasner, reports that the Fraternal Order of Police has hoisted billboards and flooded mailboxes and airwaves in a bid to oust the incumbent. It's helping fund a political action committee formed by retired cops that is the top spender in the race. It's blaming Krasner for the soaring violence in the city, as I mentioned earlier, despite the fact that Philadelphia's crime surge is in line with national trends. And as you mentioned earlier, Cenk, while the retired cops, the police union, and conservatives are backing his opponent, Carlos Vega, the black cops in Philadelphia, the National Enquirer, a number of labor groups, a number of labor unions have backed Krasner here. The Philadelphia Inquirer also reports that it's even mobilizing, meaning the opponents to Krasner, it's even mobilizing Republicans to change their voter registration to Democratic so they can back challenger Carlos Vega in the May 18th primary. And Vega, a veteran prosecutor who was fired from the DA's office when Krasner took charge, is also backed by former Philadelphia mayor and Pennsylvania governor Ed Rendell, who hired the lawyer as a prosecutor when he served as DA in the 1980s.
Yeah, Ed Rendell is a corporate Democrat extraordinaire. So it's unsurprising that he's with the power structure in Philadelphia, the old corrupt power structure, which he helped to set up as mayor of Philadelphia and then governor of Pennsylvania. If there was ever a progressive policy, Ed Rendell would immediately show up on television to fight back against it. So understand what's going on here. Vega is basically a Republican. And since they can't win under the Republican brand, they're pretending that that Republican is a Democrat in the Democratic primary. And as usual, they use the Fox News trick and the establishment Democrat trick of finding a minority to be the guy that they put out as their face for what is actually the power structure, which is almost all white. And so, including, as we've been telling you, the Fraternal Order of Police. Isn't it interesting that the one incredibly strong union in the country is the one that protects the property rights of the powerful? So all the unions fighting for higher wages for you guys, crushed, not powerful, etc. The Fraternal Order of Police and all the unions that are cop unions, very powerful, can't be messed with, can spend millions of dollars to knock off a prosecutor who would actually uncover their crimes. They're the one union that's strong because it protects the property of the powerful. Okay, the idea that they're protecting your lives, I wish that were the case. Far too often, it's nowhere near the case. And that doesn't have to do with the individual cops. It has to do with the system and the structure. And when anyone is a threat to that system, which is exactly what Larry Krasner is, this is what they do. They come for him with everything they've got. That's why that election is so important. If he wins, it sends a message to everybody. Going progressive is the right direction, and actually supporting the people can work. If the bad guys win, then it sends the message, oh, well, don't worry about any progressives winning as prosecutors. We'll just spend millions against them later. We'll smear them, we'll lie about them, we'll get the cop union to attack them, etc. And we'll just assassinate their character and their basically candidacy and their careers, and then we'll be done with it. And so that gets decided in Philly tomorrow. So I would encourage everybody to go out and tell everybody too, if you live in Philly, to go vote for Krasner, because the whole country's on the line in that election, honestly.
All right, when we come back from the break, Ted Cruz tells a lie, Daniel Dale fact checks him. Don't want to miss that battle. We'll be right back.
All right, first a note about one of our sponsors. In partnership with Aspiration, TYT is giving away $500 gift cards to 10 Aspiration account holders. So you know that you normally sign up through tyt.com/aspiration. You can do that in this case too, but you can go to tyt.com/win to find out how to win in this contest. One is by signing up, and others by going to Aspiration Plus. Or if you already have Aspiration, you can use your debit card 10 times between May 10th and June 15th. I don't know if I'm allowed to enter, but I'm gonna use my debit card 10 times. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, so make sure you're checking that out. And they're a wonderful progressive company. And that, yes, that does happen. So let's lighten the mood with going to our member section. And Jess B. Anti-Racist says, Cenk makes me giggle every single time when he talks about Jesus falling from the sky. I don't know if he falls, if he floats, he flies, is he like Superman? I don't know, but none of it is true. Okay, now Kurt and Ali Moyer just joined on YouTube, so thank you. We appreciate it. Now, Karen Willite writes in on YouTube Super Chat. Thank you for shedding light on this unemployment in the red states. It is absolutely unforgivable what they're doing to people. No problem. We're doing the best we can to bring you honest news. And unfortunately, that shouldn't be unique, but these days it is. Yugen Utopia writes in, great job, Cenk and Anna. Not many journalists have the integrity to tell the truth, much less without bias. And then that person names another host, but I can't confirm what that person did. I really don't know. So I'm not gonna read that, but I do appreciate you both supporting us materially and ideologically. Okay, and Solidarity from Bristol writes in, good show, Cenk and Anna. The conversation on Israel is shifting in spite of the Biden administration. Taxpayers should be asked whether they want to fund massacres. Of course, they won't be asked that. And then British 32 says, hi TYT, feel sorry that you have to report correct, unedited news during this incident and that feckless UN and USA are doing nothing to stop or even report issues correctly to citizens around the world due to basic excuses. That is unfortunate. But hey, look, you guys are all helping us to bring that truth into the world. And before this wasn't allowed, now it is. And so that's a positive change as well. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. I'm just gonna give one shout out to someone on Twitch. Null Unit just said, wow, it's been a year already. And not only are they still subscribers at tier 3, which we deeply appreciate, but gave 5,000 bits. That, what Twitch calls cheering, is really important. And it helps the show a lot. I love that you guys gift each other subs.
Yeah.
And guys, here, I wanna read one last small thing. Not a Billionaire wrote in, small chore, but always renew your free TYT sub. Yeah, if you have Amazon Prime, you can get free subscription to us through Twitch, and we still get the money, and that's great. You could also add it to the subscriptions you have because again, it's free. And yes, you have to renew it every month, and yes, it takes about 15 to 30 seconds. I get it, it is a small chore, right? But it really doesn't take that long, and it really makes a difference. So we appreciate everyone who does that, whether they're just signing up or renewing every month. We appreciate it, love you for it. All right, Anna.
I didn't expect this to be my favorite story of the day, but it ended up being my favorite story of the day. Child actor Rick Schroder, who I didn't know the existence of until today. He was the star of Silver Spoon, a show I didn't know the existence of until today. Threw a temper tantrum outside of a Costco in Los Angeles because the Costco in Los Angeles still has a policy that ensures that its patrons wear a mask when they're inside. Now, Schroder is not happy about this, and so he decides to give this poor Costco worker hell. But I do want to commend the Costco worker for keeping his composure. Let's watch.
What's your name?
My name is Jason.
And what do you do here?
I'm a supervisor, front-end supervisor.
And why aren't you letting me in?
Because in the state of California, in the county of Los Angeles, there has been and Costco, there's been no change to our mask policy. Not in the state of California or in the county.
Didn't you see the news? You didn't see the news. Nationwide Costco has said you don't need to wear masks.
Actually, that's not accurate.
What is accurate?
So what is accurate is that Costco always goes above and beyond when following the law. And the mandate in California has not changed. There does seem to be the possibility that in June, by mid-June, that's a date that California, I know,
if they allow us, if they grant us that, our kings, the people in power, you're going to listen to these people?
Well, I know
they've destroyed our economy.
Well,
they're destroying our culture. They're destroying our state.
I see.
And you're just going to listen to their rules.
Well, what we are going to do is simply follow the guidelines.
Okay. I'm getting my refund. I'm getting my refund from Costco. I suggest everybody in California get their refund from Costco. Give up your membership to Costco until they remove this.
Okay, well, this hasn't changed in any building in California, in any company that I'm aware of. The places I shop don't require masks. But that's not the point. The point is Costco is simply abiding by the law, and that's the law.
There's my refund. You're the manager?
I'm the manager.
Okay, I'm suggesting everybody in California get a refund from Costco until this rule is lifted.
My favorite part about that video is the woman who gives him the receipt for the refund. It was cut off in the clip that we showed you, but she just kind of was like, okay, walks away. Like calmest workers on the planet. But of course you have this super obnoxious guy who would, make me super irritable. But just a few things I want to note before I go to you, Cenk. So there seems to be a misunderstanding, not just by Schroeder, but many other people, about the difference between CDC guidance, which is not some sort of government regulation or law, and then actual government regulation and laws. Now in California, where this exchange happened, Governor Gavin Newsom has indicated that he wants Californians to continue wearing their masks indoors, even if they're fully vaccinated through June 15th, okay? So each state has its own policies, its own regulations. And then on top of that, you have to keep in mind that private businesses are gonna have their own policies. And in this case, Costco has decided they still want their customers to wear masks while they're inside. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna like force a private company, private companies that like maybe wouldn't wanna bake a gay cake. Are you gonna force them to bake gay cakes? Are you gonna force them to prevent people from wearing masks? Like this is a question that conservatives need to answer.
Yeah, they're not gonna answer any questions. So first of all, let's just note the irony. He played a spoiled kid in Silver Spoons, and now he's acting like a spoiled brat. And by the way, what have you done since your 1982 sitcom? Look, I'm not saying loser and entitled. I still have my money from the 1980s sitcom, and I don't want anybody taking it, okay? So I love being a Republican freedom. Keep my money, I wanna keep my money. I'm a freedom, okay, yeah, whatever, okay. So I just like the randomness of this. Because you could have gone anywhere. It's a state law. If you go to a grocery store, you have to wear a mask. If you go to a pharmacy, you have to wear a mask. I can name you literally every place and you have to wear a mask because it's a state law. And so the companies are following the state law. Their mandate to their workers is you have to wear a mask and you have to ask people to wear a mask. Otherwise, we're not in compliance with the law, we'll get in trouble. And if you don't ask people to do that, I'm gonna have to let you go because that's the mandate, right? And so.
Mandate by our kings.
By our kings. No, we elected them, and you guys are trying to recall Gavin Newsom. I got no love for Gavin Newsom. I think the recall is silly, but no, we elected him. We could unelect him. We might be in the middle of unelecting him now. That means he's not a king, right? And so if he was a king, you wouldn't bother doing a recall effort, or the recall effort would have weapons. Okay, so that's not how this system works, and you obviously don't understand it. But he's like, that's it. I want a refund from Costco. Okay, are you gonna get a refund from the grocery store? Are you not gonna buy any groceries? What are you gonna do? How are you gonna live?
Yeah, that's a good point. And by the way, Costco, very generous with their refunds. Sometimes you don't even have to show up with a receipt.
Wow, well that's a nice
like
for Costco. And apparently they have very friendly employees.
Yeah, no, that guy was like, yes sir, a friend and supervisor. Who doesn't love that guy?
Yeah, brother, I don't know when we became friends, but I like it, I'm buying into it.
Jason.
Oh, that's my name, Jason. I'm a friend and supervisor. Yes, you are, Jason. Yes, you're a friend to all rational people. Yep. So, and now finally, Anna's point so good, right? We got freedom. Now make those private corporations do what we want. That is not conservative at all. I know that the conservative movement doesn't exist anymore. There is no ideology behind it. There are no principles behind it. It's just a bunch of people saying, freedom, and cops should be able to kill black people and stop taking my money from taxes. I don't want to help anyone else. I just want to be selfish and hide all my money. That's the Republican Party. That's it. I'm done with it. That's the entire Republican Party. So it's unsurprising that they would have a fool like Rick Schroeder, who's never done anything in his life, except
he got handed a show when he was a kid. When he was a kid, it's not like he was like, oh, he worked hard and stuff like that. Oh, you look like a spoiled kid. Come on, you do it, right? And so it turns out they got whoever did the casting for Silver Spoons, you nailed it.
Nailed it. But there's something with these child actors because Scott Baio was a child actor, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
in a sense.
By the time he was the star of Charles in Charge, I think he was an adult, right?
Yes.
Because he was Charles in Charge in Our Days and Our Lives.
Yes,
right?
Yes. He was a child actor in Happy Days, of course.
That's right.
And then there was the spin-offs, and then there was Charles in Charge.
Well, Scott Baio has weighed in on this.
Oh, thanks
conflict.
God, another child actor.
Yeah,
what did he have to say?
He says the Costco manager / employee said, "It's a law to wear the mask. It's not a law. It is a mandate from the dictators."
Well, by the way, even if that were true, it would still be a law. The dictators make laws. They have a different way of making laws, but it's not like in North Korea there aren't any laws. It's just the dictator makes them. They don't care about anything. They're like, it's not a law. We're not gonna follow it, man, because we don't believe in democracy. I mean, look at the irony of that. So people vote for a governor, he passes a law, and they vote for legislators, and they pass a law. And these guys go, dictators. So I'm not gonna follow the law. In other words, you don't believe in the rule of law and you don't believe in democracy while you're ironically calling the people into democracy dictators. How's that for a twist? But it's okay, guys. Bottom line is conservatives, logic not required.
Let's take our break now. Let's get it out of the way. And when we come back, we have fantastic stories for you, including a black homeowner in Indianapolis who was getting lowballed on her appraisals. So she decided to do an experiment. You do not want to miss the results of that experiment. And then we'll finally get to that Ted Cruz story that I've been teasing you all with when we come back.
Back during the break here, let me go to our members section first. K. John Dragon says the Republicans can't stand federal regulations until they can try to use them to enforce their own will. Keep up the great work, guys. Thank you. And thank you for joining through tyt.com/join. You help us spread the truth and change. Ara writes in the same place, there is no way the Costco manager is paid enough to deal with anti-maskers. My hiatus reality writes in, hey, I have a novel concept to cool off the economy. Why don't we fund the IRS so the corporations in the top 1% actually pay what they should be paying? Oh, that's right, they only want socialism to work for them. That's exactly right. There's tons of ways of doing it, but my guess is they're not gonna ask you or us on how to do that because it isn't about that, it's about helping the rich get richer. Peter Grudge says, is it me or does Ricky Schroeder look like he rolled out of a dumpster to go make that complaint? It is not you, okay? Tyrannosaurus in F14 writes in, the royalties have dried up, he's gotta make rent. Or maybe take a shower, I don't know. And now I'm gonna go to Twitch. Elder Mind Pulse gifted 30 subs, that is incredibly generous. We appreciate that. Sawya has been with us for 2 months, said, love you guys. Queen Witch 10 months, Injustifiable said 7 months and counting. Love TYT, thanks for letting us know what the lamestream media won't. Appreciate it. Sharpie Diesel gave 300 bits and has been with us for 4 months. Jorge Aguilar said, here to file my Twitch sub extension on tax day. Thank you, Jeffrey Bezosington III. Take less than a minute. Again, if you have Amazon Prime, it's free, whether it's Jeff Bezos III or not, it doesn't matter, but we do get the money for it. So find out how you can do that at tyt.com/prime. Is it Amazon Prime? That makes sense.
Mama M Media wrote in, love getting an honest take on the news. Been with us for 11 months. Wasabi Dragon wrote in, I'm so upset that the US wants to take the moral lead in the world. They vote against the UN resolution. Why can't we do the simple morally correct thing and support the Palestinians? For that matter, why haven't we done the right thing for 50 years? Because the reality is power never concedes without a demand. And so once people are in power, all they do is enrich themselves. So that's a sad reality. Every once in a while we'll get something that changes the system, and that's what we're fighting for. We've got to change it so that we change the rules, otherwise it'll keep going like this. Dragon Squad First Class, been with us for 10 months, says, I'm back and I'm on fire thanks to TYT for all you do. Well, thank you for all you do. Thunderous Dragon has been with us 12 months. Real Blue Tech, 7 months on tier 3. English Breakfast Dragon gifted a sub. Spanky 75, fun name, gifted a sub. The Chicken Fried Dragon, Serious Business, Psycho Mo, Ella Toi, all gifted subs, all awesome. All right, back on TYT, Jen Cadana with you.
An update on the Schroeder story that we just did. Sorry guys, we got to take that down. We'll get to Ted Cruz unfortunately later. But one of our viewers sent me this link about Rick Schroeder, who we just did a story on. Apparently Rick Schroeder put up hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to bail Kyle Rittenhouse out. He was the one who posted bail for him. Rick Schroeder explains bail for Kenosha shooter, Kyle Rittenhouse. He murdered 2 people, by the way. It made me mad that he was in custody.
Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old that went with a weapon into the middle of protests and then provoked people and then shot and killed them. So Rick Schroeder apparently is a terrible, terrible human being. He's not just a clown, he's a dangerous clown.
So thank you to Jeremy for reminding me about that. All right, well, let's move on to our next story. Now we can put Cruz's mug up. Try to avoid losing your lunch. All right, so Texas Senator Ted Cruz called the For the People Act, which would reform our elections, get money out of politics, secure the elections by ensuring that there are paper ballots and that voting machines aren't connected to, the internet. He spread a bunch of lies about them. Basically made it seem as though they're actually undemocratic and would allow for ineligible voters to vote. Let's hear what his lies were exactly.
This bill right now automatically registers to vote anyone who interacts with the government. So if you get a welfare check, if you get an unemployment check, if you get a driver's license, you attend a public college or university, you're automatically registered to vote. Millions of illegal immigrants fall into those categories. It explicitly sets up a process to register those millions of illegal immigrants.
All right, let's go to Daniel Dale from CNN, their fact checker.
None of what you just heard is correct. The Democrats' proposed election legislation explicitly says over and over that only American citizens would be eligible to get registered, just like under current law. Automatic voter registration does not mean literally everyone gets registered regardless of their immigration status. Here's how it does work. When a US citizen has dealings with a government agency, from the DMV to a Medicaid office, they would automatically have their info sent to elections officials to get signed up to vote unless they decided to opt out. Under the Democratic bill, the info sent to elections officials would have to include information showing this person is a citizen. Now, Senator Cruz notes that the bill doesn't require people to provide hard proof that they're a citizen, that they're allowed to simply declare that they are. Well, here's some critical context. Only a declaration of citizenship is required today under existing federal law. And the declaration system works. Non-citizens face prison time and deportation if they lie about this. injustice and fraud is extremely rare. Similarly, it is true that non-citizens sometimes mistakenly get registered under automatic voter registration, but such mistakes also happen sometimes without automatic voter registration. And we know that mistakes aren't a widespread problem under so-called AVR systems. More than a third of US states from Georgia to Oregon already have AVR, and there's no sign that undocumented immigrants are being registered in large numbers in those states. In summary, again, Senator Cruz's claims are just plain incorrect.
I just want to get to a point where both sides or multiple sides to any debate can at least agree on the facts, because in this country we spend an insane amount of time just trying to agree on what the facts are before we can even engage in the legitimate debate. The For the People Act isn't gonna pass. Democrats are weak, Manchin is trash. Manchin has already said he's against it because he's really a Republican in Democrats' clothing, barely. And so it's not, that's part of the reason why this story doesn't even really matter. Ted Cruz is gonna lie right there on the Senate floor. This is what he does, just like every other Republican lawmaker, and in some cases Democratic lawmakers as well. The For the People Act isn't gonna pass. We're still gonna have a broken electoral system. We're still gonna have problems with money in politics. Nothing is gonna change because we have a group of feckless, low-life losers who are just self-interested in Congress, and Ted Cruz is among one of the top that fall under that category.
Yeah, Ted Cruz lying is not the breaking news, but I think this story is important because 5 years ago, it is inconceivable that an outlet like CNN would have fact-checked a Republican senator. They could say all day long that they would have, they didn't. We covered it thoroughly throughout. And so, don't get me wrong, I'm giving them credit now. That was a great fact check. Normally that's what we have to do on the show. Normally Ted Cruz will go on a place like CNN, just lie and lie and lie, nobody will say anything. Then we'll break it down the next day and tell you that's actually, none of that is true, here's why. I don't have to say it anymore because Daniel Dale just said it and he said it on CNN. To me, that's borderline shocking. Again, normally they just cater to corporate Republicans and Democrats. The fact that they, because of the Trump era, have begun to say things that are true about them, like they're lying, that's amazing. It shouldn't be amazing. It should be elementary for journalists to say what is true and what is not true. But it's taken us, for me at least, a quarter of a century of covering politics and news before I could finally see journalism break out on cable news. So that's a great development, it is.
I mean, look, what you're saying is true, but it does remind me quite a bit of previous conversations that we've had about husbands who take out the garbage and then want like a congratulatory gift basket after doing so, like they do the bare minimum.
God, that sounds so good.
Yeah, I know. They want the gift basket after they do the bare minimum, like after they do what they're supposed to do, which is help around the house, also take out the trash, load the dishwasher, whatever it is. In this case, sure, I guess CNN gets cookies for doing some fact checking. Congratulations. But what's the point of the media? Like, what's the point of journalism if it isn't the fact checking? Like, people in positions of power lie. This isn't even about ideological differences. Anyone in a position of power, a politician, someone, a manager at a company who's trying to defend himself after they did something awful, they're gonna lie. They hold press conferences to lie. They do these speeches on the House or the Senate floor to lie. Like, it is your job as a journalist to immediately assume that they're lying to you, and through your fact checking, you should be pleasantly surprised when they don't lie to you. That's what journalism is.
Well, was supposed to be. It didn't turn out that way. They view official sources as credible, unofficial sources, that's people like you, as not credible, right? And so, but look, Chuck Todd, in a different instance over the weekend, checked Dan Crenshaw a tiny bit.
Barely.
Right? So that's another Republican, and only when he was attacking the media. He attacks you guys, maybe we correct it, maybe we don't. He attacks the media, he's like, whoa, right? But again, I've seen Chuck Todd his whole career. He never did that before. So there's like tiny little instances of journalism breaking out. And so I'm here to encourage it. I wish there was more of it, and maybe one day there'll be more of it. But I want to go back finally to the policy issue that Anna brought up that Ted Cruz was talking about in the first place. Yes, he's absolutely positively lying about how they're all gonna register undocumented immigrants and it's all gonna be over the top fraud. Daniel Dale already told you the facts on that. But on the Democratic side, they're also guilty. So Joe Manchin, basically they've now split up what used to be HR 1. There's an oversimplification, but good enough, into 2 different bills. The John Lewis bill, again, oversimplification, and the For the People Act. So Manchin says, well, maybe I could do the John Lewis one. Hey, that makes me look like a civil rights hero, and there's some positives in that bill. But For the People Act, he's not going to do. Now, what did I tell you guys? If you watch the Young Turks every day, you know I told you they would take HR 1 and they would take out the anti-corruption parts in it. For the People Act has all the anti-corruption parts, and they're jettisoning it. And you could say, hey, I'm blaming Joe Manchin for that because he's the one driving it. I don't see Biden fighting him.
Right.
I see some people huffing and puffing, but are they fighting Manchin? Are they doing anything to actually say, no, not on our watch, and what do we need to do to make sure he doesn't get away with it? Maybe they will later, but right now, sound of silence. Nothing. Joe Manchin is president, and let's be honest, Joe Biden likes it. Joe Biden gets to use Manchin as an excuse for doing the things he actually wants to do as a conservative Democrat.
Just like FDR would do, right?
Yeah, just like FDR. So look, we're here to be honest about the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and the media. And if you don't like it, that's a sad day for you. But what we're doing is we're delivering the truth for you. And Daniel Dale, thank you for being a partner in that. And CNN, thank you for being a partner in that, at least in that instance. Very much appreciated. We look forward to more.
But be careful what you wish for with fact checking. I mean, fact checking is great. But when fact checking is used, or it's a cover, right? Like we've seen quite a bit of that with like the Washington Post, for instance, during Democratic primaries when Bernie Sanders is running and they fact check Bernie Sanders. And their fact checks, I mean, they'll give him like a billion Pinocchios when in reality he didn't lie at all, and there's ample evidence indicating that he didn't lie at all. So like that's something to look out for as well. Fact check the fact checkers. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, look, we've given you many examples of so-called fact checks where they say Bernie or some other progressive is largely right, and then they'll give him 3 Pinocchios on a technicality that they think. They're like, well, he said over 10 years, but it's over 11 years, 3 Pinocchios. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Right? And so that's okay. It's not okay, but that is a phenomenon. And related to that, last thing is that, so Chuck Todd tweaks Dan Crenshaw. That was huge news this weekend. Chuck Todd talked about, was it brown shirts? Was it him or Scarborough or everyone else on MSNBC, right? When it came to Bernie Sanders and progressives and Chris Matthews, et cetera. Like they will say vicious things about progressives nonstop, and nobody thinks that's newsworthy because they're like, oh yeah, they're holding the powerless accountable. But when they hold the powerful accountable, we're like, whoa, is that media in America? So maybe the exception proves the rule, which is that no, normally they do not hold the powerful accountable. That's why this is a breaking news story. Somebody in journalism did their job. Holy cow.
Man, what a sad state of affairs. All right, well, let's talk about my favorite topic, housing. This time, racism in housing. Charlotte Duffy, a black homeowner in Indianapolis, says that she was racially discriminated against when she was getting her home appraised in 2020. Now, when you get your home appraised, obviously you have a ballpark figure in your mind. You can look at comps in the area. How much do other homes in the neighborhood cost? When was the last time they were remodeled? And you kind of have a good idea, a good sense of what your home can be appraised for. Now, an early appraisal came in at $149,000 less than the final one after she staged the home with a white homeowner instead of, presenting herself as the homeowner. So let me tell you how it all went down. During the early months of the coronavirus pandemic last year, the first 2 appraisers who visited Duffy's home just west of downtown Indianapolis valued it at $125,000 and $110,000 respectively. But things were different the third time around when she asked a friend of hers, a white male, to pose as the real homeowner as the appraisal was happening. Duffy, who's African American, communicated with the appraiser strictly via email, stripped her home of all signs of her racial and cultural identity, and had the white husband of a friend stand in for her during the appraiser's visit. The home's new value? $259,000.
That's unbelievable.
That's amazing.
I literally had trouble believing that this morning. So I went to read the article once somebody gave us a summary during the production meeting, because I was like, that is such an enormous difference. That's more than twice what the other appraiser had it at, or two other appraisers had it at, when they knew that the homeowner was black. Really? I mean, I could see a 20% difference because of structural inherent racism, but 100% difference? And then you read the article, no, she's got all the documents. And she did the appraisals, and then the companies that did the appraisals are quoted in the article. I get that it's anecdotal because it happened to one person, and so we're being fair about in telling you that. But did it happen? It definitely happened, and she also has the property values of the houses around her, and that's why it didn't make any sense. And so why did she do this anyway? She was trying to get money out of the house because she had built up some value in the house, and prices had gone up. As we've discussed on the show many times, housing prices are going up everywhere, and they had in her case as well. And she was thinking of buying her grandmother's house so it could stay in the family with that extra money. But she was denied when they thought she was black. She brings in the white guy, $259,000. It was 115 before, now it's 259. That's unbelievable.
I mean, one appraiser appraised the home at $110,000.
Oh, 110, yeah.
Yeah, so
unbelievable.
It's insane. I mean, but you mentioned that this is anecdotal, but of course this is a trend that we're seeing with black homeowners, not just in how their homes are appraised, but also in the interest rates that they get when they're approved for a mortgage. So for instance, during the process, Duffy said that she had also been quoted interest rates of 4%, 3.75%, and 5%. By comparison, Duffy said the interest rate on her current mortgage loan was 3.9%. And remember, this is all happening when interest rates are like dropping significantly in the housing market, especially, right? Also at the time, rates on a 30-year and 15-year mortgage had fallen below 3.5% that April and continued declining throughout the spring and summer, according to Freddie Mac data. And so, as I mentioned earlier, yes, this particular story is anecdotal, but if you look at the statistics, if you look at the trends, there are black homeowners who are experiencing very similar treatment. So for instance, let's go to this one study that was done by Andre Perry. He's from the Brookings Institute, and he conducted research on how racial bias distorts the housing market. And here's what he found. They controlled for crime, walkability, and other factors that could affect home prices. After those factors were controlled for, homes in black neighborhoods were underpriced by 23%, or about $48,000 per home. Cumulatively, there was a loss of $160 billion in lost equity. And that's what Duffy was trying to do here. She was trying to take out an equity line of credit in order to purchase her grandmother's home. If your home is undervalued, well, then the amount that you're able to take out in an equity line of credit is either nothing or a much smaller amount than what you are rightfully supposed to get. The study led to the crafting, by the way, of the Real Estate Valuation Fairness and Improvement Act of 2021, which will go nowhere. It was introduced in the US House of Representatives in April. The bill addresses racial disparities in residential and commercial real estate appraisals. I say it'll go nowhere because Congress accomplishes nothing.
Yeah, now another super important fact. Anna mentioned that she got 3.9% interest, and you look at 4 or 5 and stuff, think, well, is that right or wrong? I'm not sure. Well, she then did the same exact loan with the Fair Housing Administration, except she did not check off her race or gender. Instead of 3.9%, the interest rate came back at 2.9%.
Jeez.
Now, guys, when you hear the phrase white privilege, it does not mean you own a mansion and a yacht in the middle of Nebraska. What it means is you get the 2.9% interest rate and save tons and tons of money, and black people don't. You get a higher appraisal for your house, and black people don't, and you don't even know that. You don't. It's okay. You're not guilty of it. But the banks that are doing this, the appraisers that are doing this, the power structure that is doing this is guilty of it. And we're trying to make you aware of that so we can all be brothers and sisters and fight back against it so we can get real justice in this country for everyone. All right, for the members, we got the craziest Trump fan you've ever seen in the bonus episode. We'll see you there.
So a lot of progressive office holders are doing something fun. I like fun. They're doing the last 2 years in 2 minutes. Okay, we're gonna try it here. First, I wanna let you guys know about the years before that. Hey, remember we started the Just Democrats here on the Young Turks. It was officially launched on our air, basically by you guys. And then we featured AOC, we featured Cori Bush, and Ro Khanna became the first ever Just Democrat incumbent, all on the Young Turks. Now, the last 2 years have been a spectacular follow-up to that. So let's put the 2 minutes on the clock and do this. Young Turks got to start back in 2002, and I think we've been an important part of the progressive movement ever since. What we mainly do is amplify the progressive voice and candidates out there, and I think we've done a pretty good job. Right now, we're currently #1 most engaged news politics network online, beating CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, all of them. We're #1 in total minutes watched. That means not only the number of people watching, but how long they watch. We just crossed 20 million followers and 500 million monthly views. Now, why? That's because actually the country's progressive. It's 2/3 progressive. And you guys have allowed us to be your voice, and we're incredibly thankful for that. So what did we do with that voice? Well, let's look at 2019. We went all over the country talking to you guys and the candidates. So we were in Miami, we were in Detroit, we were in Houston, and we were in Iowa. In fact, we were all over Iowa. You guys were all over Iowa, and all of the candidates saw you guys. We had wonderful people speaking, like the one and only Nina Turner at our rallies. Bernie Sanders stopped by, Andrew Yang, Elizabeth Warren. We interviewed almost everyone on the campaign trail, with the exception of Biden and Buttigieg. And we held them accountable. We even did a progressive economic pledge, and so many wonderful people signed on to that. Bernie Sanders, Warren, Marianne Williamson, AOC, the entire squad, Justice Democrats, and so many others. Now, on top of all that, we started a show called The Conversation, where we featured so many progressive thinkers, writers, and candidates. And one of the candidates we featured in 2019 was Jamal Bowman. Here comes Jamal Bowman. Then we had an amazing 2020. We hired a climate reporter. Damage Report passed 500,000 subscribers. Young Turks passed 5 million subscribers. We're getting the message out to more and more people. Bernie Sanders comes on in the heat of the primary. He comes on after the election to say what we're gonna do for the future. And then Marie Newman wins. Jamal Bowman wins. Cori Bush wins. And then just when you thought it couldn't get any better, here comes Nina Turner. Hello, somebody. And she's running for Congress, and she comes on the Young Turks first. On election week, we had nearly 2 million hours of viewing. We're #1 destination for progressives. You made all that happen. This is amazing, and thank you for those 2 years. What, I went past 2 minutes? Of course!
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
All right, back on TYT's bonus episode, Cenk and Anna with you guys.
You tell them. You tell them what you just told me.
Oh yeah, I'm interviewing my dad today. You guys will get to see it tomorrow. Yeah, look, he's calling me now. He's probably trying to get in. He's like, what is this? Let me in. Okay, Craig, go get him. Yeah, all right. So his book is The Original Young Turk. It's on shoptyt.com. As you'll see tomorrow in the interview, amazing stories. And he just says it so flippantly. And then I was in the middle of a rebellion against the government. And then the military police arrested me. And then I ran for my life, and just
not a big deal.
Not a big deal.
Yeah.
Matter of fact. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing book, and it's like it goes by like this. You'll be able to read it so quick because he's so matter of fact about amazing stories. All right, what do we got?
So let's talk about voter fraud because it's the Trump campaign's favorite topic. All right, so while the Trump campaign would have you believe that Democratic voters are doing voter fraud all over the place, we keep hearing stories about Trump supporters who tried to do voter fraud and then got caught. One of them is a man who's now being investigated for the murder of his wife. But before he was investigated for the murder of his wife, he decided to vote on her behalf after she went missing. So Barry Morphew is the name of the person being investigated now. He told investigators that he mailed the ballot on behalf of his wife, Suzanne Morphew, to help Trump win, saying, quote, all these other guys are cheating, and that he thought his wife would have voted for Trump anyway, according to an arrest warrant affidavit signed Thursday by a judge in Chaffee County. So Morphew claimed he didn't know it was illegal to commit voter fraud, but he did say, I just wanted Trump to win. Cool.
Yeah, so let's break this down. This guy is now arrested on suspicion of murdering his wife. And he says she would have wanted to vote for Donald Trump. One, I'm pretty sure you're not the authority on what she would have wanted to do if in fact you killed her. Two, I'm pretty sure she would have wanted to have lived rather than be murdered. And that didn't happen either, apparently.
Allegedly murdered.
Yes.
Let's just cross our T's and dot our I's.
Yes, so now look, he's been arrested for it, but her body is missing. And so they did like 145 searches and they can't find her. Now the authorities are presuming her dead. And obviously they think they have enough evidence on the husband to arrest him for that and charge with first-degree murder, okay? Now, is he the average Trump voter? Of course not, right? Oh, and then he pretended to be, according to the authorities, he pretended to be all upset about it and made these videos. Oh my God, I'm trying to find my wife, etc. We'll find out in court if that's, what evidence they have on him. But so, anyways,
he was worried about Democratic voters cheating, and then he proceeded to commit voter fraud, and then claimed that he didn't know he was doing anything wrong.
Yeah, well, once you start with cheating, we're in the wrong category to begin with. And remember, this is now a couple of instances. So congratulations, Trump voters. We did find a voter fraud. And almost every instance is of a Trump voter. And almost every time, they say the same exact thing. The guy in Pennsylvania that voted for his dead mom said the same exact thing. I mean, Trump tells me everybody's cheating anyway. Democrats are cheating anyway. We might as well do it, right? So under this idea of we might as well do it, there's been now a number. But even then, it's like a handful of cases.
Right, exactly.
So if Trump had won instead of Biden, and he had won by the same kind of narrow margin, 11,000 votes in one state or whatever, these 3-4 cases wouldn't have overturned it for Biden either, right?
Nope.
Because voter fraud is minuscule in this country.
It's minuscule, and when it happens, people get caught.
Yeah, and look at this, boom, he's caught. And I like that this guy's like worried about Democratic cheating and breaking laws. He's charged with first-degree murder. I'm pretty sure that's breaking a law, and a much more significant one. So I don't know how representative he is of Trump voters. But that right there is a mindset of I get to do anything I want. I get to be above the law. But when it comes to others, I say, oh, I'm worried about the Democrats breaking the law. That mindset is very common. Not at this extreme, but Trump's the king of that mindset. He's like, I'm the only one who can give you rule of law and order. He said that at the convention in 2016, right? Then he went and broke every law there was out about self-enrichment, asking for favors from the foreign governments for his own elections, campaign finance laws, and the list goes on and on and on. When right-wingers talk about the rule of law, they mean what we're going to use to oppress you. They don't mean the actual rule of law, which they flout sometimes in extreme ways all the time.
Yeah. I noticed that Champagne Comunista writing in the comments section, lower part of the screen, you'll see some comments coming from our various platforms. And I thought Champagne Comunista didn't watch TYT because I would see comments from this person on other progressive shows and I'd be like, what about us? So I'm really happy to see that. I don't know if it's a guy or a girl. That's why, or non-binary. Like that's why I keep saying this person or that or they. But I'm glad that they watched the show. Makes me happy. Makes me proud.
I'm not as familiar with the Champagne crowd or the Comunista crowd. So, but if you say that's important, great. Good to have you.
Yeah, the more people, the better. It's great. Anyway, while you were talking about this Trump guy, I couldn't help but think about something that happened over the weekend that I want to share. Like, let's take a little break from the other stories.
Yeah.
That we're gonna. The rest of the stuff is fun. Let's hold on the Michael video. We'll play it tomorrow. I think we've had enough Israel stuff for the day.
Okay.
But we have one other fun video we'll get to in just a minute. So I am not about to be fully vaccinated, but I'm getting my second Moderna shot on Friday. And then 2 weeks after that, I'll be fully vaccinated. So I'm putting my cards on the table. You guys.
There it is. They're right there.
Nonetheless, Korean spas have opened up in Los Angeles.
Well, cards are on the table.
Cards are on the table, and I went to one.
Oh, you did?
I went to one on Saturday, and it was the best decision of my life.
Fascinating. How so?
So massages are expensive. I don't get massages often, but I will treat myself twice a year. Mostly because if I don't, my back pain is just unbearable and my back is tight, working out is harder. So since coronavirus happened, I hadn't gotten a massage in well over a year. And once it opened, don't even bother with other spas. Go straight to a Korean spa because you want to get it done. And those Korean ladies, they're not. There's no weak stuff with them, right? There's you're gonna get those knots taken care of. So anyway, make an appointment. Christian made an appointment. I'm very happy about that. And then we go. But since he made the appointment, he booked a service that I was unfamiliar with. I like to get the body scrub massage combo. Okay. But he booked acupressure, which I had never heard of, knew nothing about, and I was terrified that it was going to involve needles because acupuncture, sounds too
I totally get it. I've never had it. I instantly thought it involved needles.
Right. Luckily, does not involve needles. It was the best massage of my life.
Whoa.
There was very little rubbing taking place, but there was this woman comes in and she just starts pressing on parts of my body, right? And as she's pressing on these pressure points, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Knots in other parts of my body, I could feel them unknotting themselves. It was crazy, guys. So she's working on my, near my shoulder blade, for instance, right? She's presses something near my shoulder blade, and all of a sudden I feel muscles unravel in my arm. Isn't that crazy?
Interesting.
Koreans get it. They just get it. They just get it.
So first of all, Korean spas are the place where everybody's naked, right?
Yes.
Okay, it's mandatory.
It actually is mandatory.
The anti-maskers would love it. No clothes allowed. They're yeah, freedom! We knew it was the Koreans. Trump was right again. No, those are the other Koreans. Anyway, I just can't. I'm too cheap. I I don't know how many fancy massages I've had in my life. I doubt it's over 2. Okay.
It changes your life though. It makes you feel so. Do you wake up with aches and pains? You have to. You're like.
And maybe I do. I don't know. I'm such a, I had this, what wound up being a gash at the bottom of my foot. I walked around on it for 3 weeks, not like in pain. I didn't bother looking. I didn't. And then finally I was like, oh, maybe there's something down there. And I looked and I was like, oh, it's split open. Oh, I could fix that with this and that, with a cream or whatever, right? That's the guy I am. So do I wake up with pain? I don't know. Okay.
Oh, okay, tough guy. Okay,
I mean,
he's too strong, guys. He's too strong. He didn't notice the gash on the bottom of his foot. Okay, I'm too strong. What do you want me to do? I don't need a massage. Okay, I wake up. Do I have the aches? Do I have the pains? I don't know. I'm too strong.
I don't know how I became Paulie Walnuts, but I like it. Okay, now I'm going to tell you the opposite story in a sec. But in terms of the knots, I have never understood what people mean when they say knots, like untying the knots. So I don't know if I have knots. I don't know if they can be untied.
You have knots. We all have knots. Some more than others, but I guarantee you have knots and you can feel them. Like if you ever like just kind of like put pressure, but like rub part of your back, your upper back, you'll feel like something like jiggling around, like moving. Like you can feel like I don't know. It's just you could feel it. Your muscles are knotted up.
I don't feel
it's
anything.
hard to explain it, but once you feel it, you know it. Like you know it's a knot.
All right, I hear you. Okay, now let's go to the opposite end. So since I don't do the fancy ones, I barely do any at all. But like back in the day, Wendy took me to a couple of Chinese places that are like 15, 20 bucks, right? And they do the neck. Sometimes they'll do the head. I love the head scratches. Can't get enough of it. Okay.
Dudes love the head scratches.
Oh, totally. I'm like a dog. I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. That's good. Let's do more of that. Okay. Anyway, so when they're doing the back and neck, they do it way too hard. So I tell them to ease up, right? And Wendy has to translate for me. And then they laugh like crazy. Wendy and every Chinese masseuse lady there, she's like, oh, she says something about how I'm like it really weak, and they're all like, wow, they're like unabashed about it. I kind of like respect that.
Yep.
They're not hiding it.
Yep.
Like, yeah, they're speaking a different language, but it's abundantly clear what they're saying, and Wendy will tell me. And then they'll every once in a while they'll talk back and forth, Wendy and my masseuse, and then they'll laugh more and more. Like, and sometimes I think they do it on purpose. They'll start out like medium. I don't even like medium, right? And I'll be like, no, softer, right?
It's so crazy.
And then she'll turn and she'll be like, does he really want soft? And then Wendy be like, yeah, he really wants softer. Like, and then they'll go softer. Okay. So I was thinking of calling it too soft coffee, but that was not as good. So I went with too strong. But yeah.
But that's the thing. Like it's so weird that you like weak massages, right? Because you obviously do. You have aches and pains. I know for a fact that it's impossible for you not to. Okay, but you don't even notice them. So like, it's crazy that you don't notice the aches and pains, and then you also like super weak massages. Like, look, are they uncomfortable? The strong massage, especially at the Korean spa. Like they don't mess around. Yeah, it's uncomfortable while it's happening, but you just feel like jelly afterwards. Like you feel your body feels so loose, so nimble. Like I
don't know that my body is capable of feeling nimble. Okay, but all right, look, I just you partly answered it right there. I never got it, right? Like, yeah, okay, I guess your body's supposed to feel better afterwards, but I feel like, why am I getting beat up with my own money? Like I'm paying you a lot of money, and then you're kicking this crap out of me, right? So like, where's the, I'm like, when do we get to the fun part? Well, that was a different kind of massage, but anyways, so no, but light back and neck massage and play with my hair, oh, love it, okay.
Yeah.
But everything else, no, I got no use for the Koreans, and I'm not walking around naked all day. I'm just not, for whatever reason.
Okay, so one comment about that, and then we'll move on. You know, we've been quarantining. I haven't really seen many other people in person. I didn't realize it at the time, but this was my first time like really out around other people. And I forgot how jarring it is when you see other people naked. Yeah. Like I had gone to the Korean spa a billion times before and it was no big deal. And so when I walked into the women's locker room and I saw my first nudie, right? I was like, and then I caught myself looking too much and I was like, oh God, I gotta stop. Like I gotta get used to this again. It was very, and then like I got uncomfortable for a minute. Like, is this okay? Am I supposed to do this, right? Like, I don't know, it took a while to like get accustomed to something that was very comfortable for me before. So it's just, it's interesting. Once everything starts to really open up and people are comfortable again, I'm sure you guys are gonna experience those moments where you're like, oh wait, am I doing something wrong? Is this normal? Is this okay?
Totally. So I'll say two things about that. One, now when I walk outside and CDC said it's okay without masks, there's no law in LA about masks outside, etc. And we're walking past each other and we're still about like 3, 4, 6, I don't know what the feet are away. I'm still too uncomfortable, I can't do it. I still move to the street or the lawn, I still move 6 feet apart.
Yeah, me too.
It's actually not really necessary. There's almost no chance you could get it outside in a situation like that. But I'm not ready yet, right? And even when I go to that one time that I went and ate inside of the restaurant after being fully vaccinated, I'm like, is this legal? Is this okay?
Yeah.
All right, are we really gonna be all right? And we were, right? Yeah. And so now the naked thing, like it happens in locker rooms, right? When gyms I've joined. I just don't know why they do it. Right?
Why they get naked?
No, why they walk. I get why they get naked. They go to take a shower. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm not like, oh no, make sure you go to the shower in a 3-piece suit. Like I don't have any hangups about it. Have at it, Hoss, right? But then some dudes, and everybody knows this, will walk around the locker room for hours naked.
Yeah,
right?
Big Rick energy.
Yeah, I guess.
No, but that's what it is. I've talked to Christian about this. That's why it happens.
Yeah, I mean, but I think they're being rude because like me, I think I don't want to intimidate everybody else, right? And you just got to be respectful of others,
You're
right?
ridiculous.
I am a little ridiculous. As the kids say, apparently, the youngsters. Anyways, just we got it. It's okay. Let's put on shorts and move on.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's end today's bonus episode with a fun story about the miracle of felines. So, cats are kind of amazing. They can do cool things like jump on top of high objects. They can also jump off of high objects and land on their 2 feet, or I should say 4 legs. And so that recently happened in Chicago where there was a building on fire, and get a load of what this cat did.
Okay, so the original video was 45 seconds, so there was like 30 seconds before the cat jumps. So there's a lot I love about the video. It's fun, it's nonsense. But number one is the 30 seconds before he jumped. I'm like, I know he's gonna jump because I know the story. I'm like, and it was like the most suspenseful 30 seconds of my life, right? And the original video didn't have what we did there with the shading, right? And so it had that. Oof. And then the second amazing part was when he bounces. He's like, boom.
Yeah.
As if he just bounced off a pillow, right? And I was like, wow. And then I thought, how far can they go? That was 5 stories.
Yeah.
Could he have done 6, 7, 8, 10? I don't want to know, right? But that, wow. So that's why they say cats have 9 lives.
That cat is the original Jerry Springer. So the cat is okay. The news confirmed this. So anyone who might be worried about the well-being of the feline, it has survived. Also, a spokesperson, Larry Langford, I'm not sure what Larry is a spokesperson for. It doesn't even really matter. He said this, it went under my car and hid until she felt better after a couple of minutes and came out and tried to scale the wall to get back in.
Jeez, I mean, you want to talk about a boss. First of all, she shakes it off, right? And then she's like, nah, I'm gonna go back in, let me see what's up. Because they had to reconnect with the owner and they couldn't for a long time. Turns out everybody's okay, right? But I mean, that's a boss move to go back into the building.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I often think about what would happen because I live in a building and there is no front door, back door situation. Like all the windows are on one side of our place. And then there's a front door. But like if there's a fire in our building, like how do I get out? And so we actually ended up buying one of these like ladders that you hook onto your windowsill and then it like goes down, you can climb down. But then what happens to Charlie? Like I think about that more often than you would expect, right? Like what do I do with my dog? Because Charlie's not a cat. Charlie's not gonna be able to land on his 4 legs and spring like that and be okay. I don't know what I would do. I would freak out. I can't leave my dog behind. What would I do? What would you do?
He'll be all right. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Why can't you just grab him and run? What? I missed that.
Because I'm not on the like first floor or like on the ground floor.
So what are you doing to get out?
You just didn't pay attention to anything I said, did you? You didn't pay attention at all.
I lost the thread there for a second. I'll be honest, cards are on the table.
So a few years ago when wildfires were really, really bad in California, one of them was actually really close to our place. We asked the HOA, like, what do we do if our building is on fire and we can't leave through like the front and only door?
Yeah.
And they didn't have an answer for us. And then Christian and I did some research and we found this ladder that you can buy that like hooks onto your windowsill.
Oh, I see.
And then it drops down and so you can go down that ladder.
Put him on your shoulder, he'd be all right. Christian's a giant guy. Yeah, put him in a bag. There you go, Craig, nice job.
Yeah,
and then
that
you
is a
hold
good.
him.
Thank you for an actual recommendation that makes sense, Craig.
But you know I would have tried to put him on my sholler and it would have ended in disaster.
Yeah, it would definitely end in disaster.
Okay, so thank you, Craig, for saving me of that.
Thank you for saving my dog, preemptively.
Yeah, no, I think about that with my kids. Like, how do I get them out in an emergency? Where would I jump? How would they jump? What would we do? So, but yeah, I hear you. So Craig solved it, we're good. It's okay, you can have the fire now. Although toot. Okay.
Yeah, seriously.
So I saw a video with Pro of squirrels jumping. This guy had set up a giant maze for squirrels to get through. It looks impossible, right? But the squirrels do it every time to get the nuts.
I love their nuts.
Yeah, still love it. So squirrels can fly. They're amazing. So it's just like the cat. And they fly up, they fly down, they fly sideways, and then if they get flipped out like in a way that they didn't expect, they do all these amazing maneuvers. The guys slowed it down. They're like to balance themselves and stuff, right? And to land in the exact spot that they need to land.
Yeah,
they're unreal. So obviously cats have some of that too, and animals are amazing. And it's funny. I was thinking about that earlier today. Then I thought about one other thing, because then I saw squirrels climbing up a tree and it's really cute, etc. Tons of squirrels here in LA, tons of squirrels where I grew up in New Jersey. And we all like, oh, squirrels are so cute. I thought, you know, man, did they catch a break on that one?
Yeah.
Because if they didn't look cute and they look like rats instead, we wouldn't have them all running around like we do. They run around everywhere. And if they look like rodents, which they actually are, but if they look like rats, right? No, we'd have killed them all, right?
Yeah. I'm glad we didn't. They're really cute.
Animals are innocent.
They're innocent. Yeah.
Man, that is a hell of a genetic lottery to win or lose.
Yeah.
Do the humans find you cute?
Totally.
If they do, you're in luck. They might even take you inside their house. They might even clean up your poop for you. They give you food after food, and they're nonstop taking care of you. They're not even worried about themselves. They're figuring out how to get you to safety, right?
You don't look cute to the humans? Bad news.
You should hear the way I talk to Charlie. Sometimes I have to stop myself because of how ridiculous it is. I tell him he's my little prince every hour of every day.
No, that's instantly ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm
and
like,
the cards are on the table, okay?
I call him my special little guy.
I'm not saying I've been called a special big guy. No, seriously, I get it because they're innocent. The animals are innocent.
And they love you so much. They're so, like dogs especially, like they love you, they're loyal to you. I've been watching Mayor of Easttown, which you should all watch. No spoilers, I'm not gonna tell you what it's about, but Kate Winslet is a national treasure and anything she's in, I will watch. And it's a good show, so you should watch it. But anyway, you know, there are moments that are kind of suspenseful or stressful, like anxiety. I'll feel a little anxiety ridden because I get so invested in the show. And Charlie is so emotionally intelligent that he'll know when I'm feeling anxiety and he'll jump on the couch just to he'll do this thing with his head. Like he'll just kind of headbutt me, but in a cute way, like feel better, don't be stressed. Like, come on.
Come on, how does he know that? You guys have a special connection. Other people don't understand. They don't understand the special connection you have.
That's right.
Okay, they're dog owners. Are you happy now? All right, guys. Is Big Rick Energy next?
I don't know.
I'm not sure either. It's not in my notes, but if it is, you know what, just in case, go to twitch.tv/TYT and you might run into Big Rick Energy.
Yeah, Big Rick Energy tonight after.
Oh, there you go, there you go. But you got to put it in the prompter, otherwise there is no prompter. But in the iPad, otherwise Burgundy won't read it. All right, so Rick does a great show. Definitely go check that out right now. Twitch.tv/TYT. All right, myself. Wait. Oh yeah. Bye.
Animals are innocent,